The reason why Tang Junhe is called Tang Junhe is actually because of Yang Xian. When this name was named, Tang Junhe was not born yet, and he had a fate with Yang Xian in the name before he was born. The name Tang Junhe was given by Tang Xiaonian. When Tang Xiaonian was 20 years old, he was doing massage for others. He met Yang Chengchuan, who was in the prime of his life at that time. Since then, he saw Yang Guo mistakenly for life. Regardless of the opposition of his family, he followed Yang Chengchuan for 3 years without hesitation. Raw rice is cooked into cooked rice. After the rice was cooked, Tang Xiaonian took the ultrasound results and excitedly went to find Yang Chengchuan, only to find out that Yang Chengchuan was not Yang Guo, but Chen Shimei. It turned out that in the second year they got married, Yang Chengchuan married someone else and gave birth to a child. The child was just born a few days ago, and Yang Chengchuan's father-in-law was the mysterious force behind his success, so he decided inseparable from marriage. Tang Xiaonian went to the hospital with tears in his eyes, and he was lying on the hospital bed. He didn't know what kind of evil had happened, and suddenly turned over and sat up again, saying that she was going to give birth to the child. Pregnant in October, she found a place she was not familiar with, and brought Tang Junhe into this world on a rainy afternoon. Tang Xiaonian also had a lot of backbone at the beginning. Yang Chengchuan came to look for her several times, but she drove her back with a big belly. Ever since she knew the fact that Yang Chengchuan was Chen Shimei, her tenderness towards Yang Chengchuan has turned into endless hatred. As soon as Yang Chengchuan came, she picked up the slippers on her feet without any effort. He beat Yang Chengchuan back with all his might, as if he wanted to beat Yang Chengchuan back into his mother's womb. Because Yang Chengchuan will come to look for Tang Xiaonian every once in a while, and he drives the most popular Santana 2000 back then. It looks like a rich man, and the more times he comes, Tang Xiaonian becomes a neighbor. The topic center of the neighborhood. Tang Xiaonian has slender eyebrows and almond-shaped eyes, and she is a first-class beauty with a plain face. She doesn't like to chat with others, and she is quite indifferent. She doesn't have much contact with her neighbors on weekdays, so naturally she doesn't know the things that surround her. Gossip. Only gradually, Tang Xiaonian became sensitive to the fact that other people looked at him in the wrong way. Tang Xiaonian hasn't read any books, but she is not stupid. After thinking about it for a while, she knows the special meaning in this look, probably brought by Yang Chengchuan. So when Yang Chengchuan came again, she beat her harder, took off both slippers, and greeted Yang Chengchuan's dog-like suit together. There was only one time when Tang Xiaonian gave Yang Chengchuan a good look. That time she was wearing slippers and pressed against the door to prevent Yang Chengchuan from coming in. She asked through the crack of the door, "What's your son's name?" Yang Chengchuan didn't understand, so he moved his ear closer. "What?" Tang Xiaonian asked again angrily, "What's your son's name? Just say it if you like, and get lost if you don't like it." Yang Chengchuan didn't want to leave, so he said, "My name is Yang Xian, my name is Yang Xian." "Which Xian?" Tang Xiaonian asked again. "Sun He Xian." Tang Xiaonian was only at the level of junior high school education, so he only knew a few commonly used Chinese characters. He frowned and thought about it for a long time, but he didn't know which Sun He Xian was. With all her strength, she closed the door with a bang, shut Yang Chengchuan out, and said, "Okay, I got it, you should get out." As soon as Yang Chengchuan left, Tang Xiaonian went to the nearby Xinhua bookstore. She was 7 months pregnant and her belly was already big. The staff of Xinhua bookstore was about to close the door, and as soon as they saw her, they hurried up to support her. "What kind of book are you looking for? Tell me, I'll help you find it. Is it about prenatal education?" Tang Xiaonian said no, she was looking for Xinhua dictionary. After receiving the Xinhua dictionary contentedly, Tang Xiaonian went home with a big belly. Facing the small dim light bulb at home, she found Sun He Xian. According to the dictionary, Xian means bright and warm, and describes the sunrise. Tang Xiaonian stared at the light bulb thinking hard, what name should he choose to compare with the word Xian? She wanted to find a brighter and warmer word to completely compare Yang Chengchuan with that woman's son. Tang Xiaonian looked through the dictionary for a long time, and after excluding options such as blazing, burning and bright, he locked on the he of Suan he. He means grand and bright. It looks more powerful than Xian. Tang Xiaonian had a flash of inspiration again, and added the word Jun in front, Jun he, Jun he. She repeated it several times, and the more she read it, the more satisfied she became, and finally she lay down on the bed contentedly and fell asleep. Yang Chengchuan naturally didn't know about this. When he knew, Tang Xiaonian had already given birth to Tang Junhe. Yang Chengchuan begged Tang Xiaonian, hoping to go in and see his son. Tang Xiaonian had just given birth, and his physical condition had not fully recovered, so he let Yang Chengchuan in without paying attention. Yang Chengchuan was overjoyed at his newborn son, and wanted to stretch out his arms to hug him, but Tang Xiaonian made a gesture to take off his slippers and hit him, so he had no choice but to withdraw his hand and salivated, asking if he should name the child. Tang Xiaonian held Tang Junhe in his arms, rolled his eyes at him, and told Yang Chengchuan ostentatiously that she had already gotten up, and her name was Tang Junhe. Yang Chengchuan was taken aback for a moment, and asked flatteringly, "Which gentleman is it, who is it?" Tang Xiaonian raised his head and said, "The gentleman of the gentleman, the famous he." Yang Chengchuan was barely considered a cultural person, and he could write a few sour poems when he was free, and he understood Tang Xiaonian's intentions as soon as he heard it. He took the opportunity to show off to Tang Xiaonian once, and commented, "This he is not good, too big and too vulgar, otherwise it should be called Jun he, the crane of Bei he, the crane among people, it sounds nice and elegant, you say it?" Tang Xiaonian glared at the pearl, and spat fiercely, "Bah, it's not vulgar, it's vulgar, get thee out of your mother's bastard." Yang Chengchuan turned pale when he cursed, and resentfully said gone. As soon as Yang Chengchuan left, Tang Xiaonian carried Tang Junhe to apply for a household registration. The person who registered the household registration information asked, "Which gentleman, which he?" Tang Xiaonian said loudly, "The lord of a gentleman, the famous he." After finishing speaking, he added, "That's the one, the famous he." Oh! The man buried his head in typing and didn't show any appreciation for the name, which made Tang Xiaonian a little disappointed. But no matter what, Tang Junhe has been involved with Yang Xian since he was born, no, even before he was born. Not only in name, but also in blood, after all, the blood of half of the scumbag Yang Chengchuan is flowing in the two of them, and they are half-brothers of the same father. This fate brought about before birth suddenly took effect when Tang Junhe was 5 years old. One night, Tang Xiaonian was watching TV with the remote control, and happened to switch to Life Channel, where a psychologist was analyzing the current social situation, saying that single-parent children are prone to introversion and low self-esteem, and they are prone to psychological problems when they grow up. Tang Xiaonian didn't take it seriously at the time, but he couldn't help observing Tang Junhe afterwards. The more he observed, the more Tang Xiaonian felt that what the expert said made sense. Tang Junhe, a child, really doesn't like to talk to people. Children from other families gather together to play in the mud, and they will inevitably be beaten by their parents when they return home. Tang Junhe never stayed with them, he only liked to play alone, or he liked to pester Tang Xiaonian. What Tang Xiaonian didn't expect was that it wasn't that Tang Junhe didn't want to play with others, but that other people's children didn't like to play with him, and it was because the rumors spread to those children's ears. Tang Xiaonian attributed all the reasons why Tang Junhe didn't fit in well with Tang Junhe living in an environment without a father. After much deliberation, she finally came up with a good solution. She remembered that Yang Chengchuan said that his wife was a middle school teacher and was in poor health, so she had to go back to her natal home for the summer vacation. She thought about it, and just took advantage of the summer vacation to send Tang Junhee to Yang Chengchuan, so that he could feel the warmth of a father's love. Although Yang Chengchuan is a scumbag, he always cares about his son. Speaking of which, although Yang Chengchuan is a scumbag, he still has a little bit of conscience. He would come over to see Tang Xiaonian and his mother every once in a while, and would give him a reasonable amount of living expenses. So, when Yang Chengchuan came over next time, Tang Xiaonian didn't hit him with the sole of his slippers. Uncharacteristically, she politely invited Yang Chengchuan to the sofa at home. Yang Chengchuan thought that Tang Xiaonian had finally figured it out after so many years, and was willing to forgive himself, rubbing his hands excitedly, but he didn't want to be too obvious, and looked at Tang Xiaonian expectantly. Tang Xiaonian knew that this request was a little too much. After all, she had never shown Yang Chengchuan a good face in so many years. She was rarely shy, and said hesitantly, "Well, I want to send you Junhee. Then stay for a while. Didn't you say that there is no one at home during the summer vacation? Junhee has never had a father to accompany him since he was a child. I am afraid that he will have psychological problems when he grows up." Yang Chengchuan didn't expect Tang Xiaonian to invite him in for this reason. He was stunned when he heard it. "Hey!" Seeing his expression, Tang Xiaonian became furious, got up and pushed him out of the door. Forget it, what kind of father are you? Hurry up, get out as far as you can." Yang Chengchuan was being pushed out by her, while trying to make up for his performance just now. "I didn't say no, I didn't realize it just now." "Hey, don't push me, Xiaonian, I really have no intention of objecting." Tang Xiaonian squinted at him. "Then what do you mean?" "Of course I would be happy to take Junhee to live with me for a few days, just. Yang Chengchuan pushed his glasses and said, "My eldest son is at home, and if Junhee wants to call me dad, I'm afraid he will turn around and talk to his mother." Leaking. You know, his mother has some mental problems and can't be stimulated. You kneel down and beg me, I won't let him call you dad. Yang Chengchuan, you really put gold on your face. Tang Xiaonian looked down on Yang Chengchuan like this from the bottom of his heart, and raised his voice scold him. That's it. So, when Tang Junhee was 5 years old, he met 6-year-old Yang Xian for the first time. At that time, he didn't know that the little brother in front of him, whose hair stood up and looked like a little model in an advertisement, was his half-brother, Yang Xian. That was also the first time he left his mother Tang Xiaonian. Tang Xiaonian stuffed him into the hands of that strange uncle who would be beaten away every time he came to his house. Tang Xiaonian squatted in front of him, stroked his soft black hair, and told him, "Let's go play with this uncle for a few days, be obedient, and soon he will see his mother again." Xiao Tang Junhee cried and refused, grinning, and said he didn't want to go. But it was useless at all, he was carried to the black car by the uncle. He cried heartrendingly, patting the rear window of the car helplessly with his 2 little hands, watching Tang Xiaonian getting farther and farther away from him, gradually turning into a small black spot, and then also out of sight. As soon as he left, Tang Xiaonian also cried, scolding Yang Chengchuan, "A scum, a beast, a scum," and a son of a while crying. She was not willing to leave Junhee for so long, but it was said on TV that a child without a father would feel inferior and introverted, so she could only take advantage of the time when Yang Chengchuan's wife returned to her natal home during the summer vacation, and sent Tang Junhee to the home of his scumbag father made him feel the warmth of his father's love. The temperature of a father's love, bullshit. Tang Xiaonian looked at the host on TV and spat. Tang Junhee didn't understand Tang Xiaonian's painstaking efforts. He thought his mother Tang Xiaonian didn't want him anymore and gave him to a stranger. The man asked him to call him father, but he just grinned and cried, refusing to say anything. The man hugged him, carried him out of the car, and brought him into a big house. Inside the house was a little brother who was a head taller than him, looking at him curiously. He cried until his nose was covered with tears, and he only cared about Tang Xiaonian, but no one wanted to talk to him. "This is your brother," called Yang Xian. Yang Chengchuan pulled Yang Xian over, and said to Tang Junhe, "It's only 1 year older than you. From now on, you can play with your brother, okay?" Tang Junhe cried and wiped his tears, saying that he didn't want his brother, but his mother. Yang Chengchuan had no choice but to turn around and say to Yang Xian, "This is your younger brother Tang Junhe, the child of a friend of Daddy. Junhe came to our house to play for a few days. When Daddy goes to work during the day, you have to take good care of your younger brother. Can't let him get lost." Yang Xian responded with a full mouth, then raised his head and asked his father, "Why is he always crying?" Yang Chengchuan said, "My brother admits his life. It's the first time he's here. Just coax him. I'll go and make you something to eat." Yang Chengchuan handed Tang Junhe to Yang Xian, turned around and went to the kitchen. He had a headache from the little son crying, and he would rather choose to cook than to coax the child. Yang Xian walked round and round this doll-like brother, treating him like a little toy, stroking his hair, poking his face, and piled up all the delicious and fun things. Failed to coax this little crying bag. For the first time in his life, he felt tired and raised his head to the ceiling and shouted, "Oh, why are you always crying?" Then he collapsed on the sofa beside him and fell asleep. Yang Xian fell asleep, and no one paid attention to Tang Junhe. He himself was a little tired from crying, and fell asleep on the sofa, head to head with Yang Xian. When Yang Chengchuan came out of the kitchen, what he saw was the scene of the two sleeping soundly. Yang Chengchuan yelled at that after filming this, but none of them woke up, so he had to carry the two children into the bedroom and let them fall asleep. The next morning, before Tang Junhe opened his eyes, he felt in a daze that something had been stuffed into his mouth. He went to bed without eating the night before. At this time, his stomach was so hungry that he thought it was his mother Tang Xiaonian who came to feed him, so he closed his eyes and took a bite. His little face was wrinkled with soreness. Tang Junhe's tears burst out immediately, and he wanted to spit out the sour grapes with his mouth puckered. Yang Xian, who started the prank, looked at his expression and laughed happily. After Yang Chengchuan put on his suit and tie, he glanced worriedly at the bedroom of the two children before leaving. The two brothers were crying loudly while the other was laughing. The scene was very troublesome. He was in a hurry to go to work and didn't have time to be a mediator, so he scolded Yang Xian hastily, "Yang Xian, don't bully my brother, hurry up and get him up to wash his face and eat breakfast." Yang Xian rolled and laughed non-stop, I couldn't wake him up just now. I stuffed a sour grape in his mouth, ha ha ha, he immediately became sour, ha 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 ha." Tang Junhe didn't know what he did wrong, and Tang Xiaonian would send him here for punishment. He washed his face alone in a sullen manner, ate a few mouthfuls of breakfast, and then, immersed in the grief of being abandoned, he refused to say a word to Yang Xian. Yang Xian's coaxing with toys was ineffective, so he turned around and went to the study to play. The day of fear and fear was finally over. At night, Tang Junhe huddled under the quilt, praying in his heart that he would see Tang Xiaonian when he opened his eyes tomorrow morning. He closed his eyes and urged himself to fall asleep quickly, but before he fell asleep, a sudden urge to urinate rose under his body. The room was dark and silent, he was a little scared, but he didn't want to wake up Yang Xian who was beside him, so he had the courage to get out of bed and headed towards the bathroom in the dark. When he reached the door of the bathroom, he reached out to turn on the light, but he stood on tiptoe and straightened his arms, but he couldn't reach the switch, so he continued to walk in the dark, urinating while trembling. After urinating, he walked out of the bathroom with a sigh of relief. Unexpectedly, a black figure suddenly jumped out from behind the door and yelled "Ah" at him. Tang Junhe was so frightened that he forgot to run away, and stood on the spot in a daze, crying "Wow!" Yang Xian laughed so hard that he fell down. Tang Junhe cried majestically, and the rain was about to come, and the crying alarmed Yang Chengchuan in his sleep. Hearing the movement, Yang Chengchuan got out of bed and walked out of the room, turned on the light and had a look. It was exactly the same as the scene in the morning, one was crying and the other was laughing. Yang Chengchuan walked over and scolded Yang Xian head and face. Yang Xian was not afraid, and while being scolded, he secretly made faces at Tang Junhe. After Yang Chengchuan scolded Yang Xian, he sent them back to the bed, barely comforted Tang Junhe, turned off the lights and went back to the house. As soon as he left, Yang Xian got up on his stomach, looked at Tang Junhe in the dark, and said in a low voice, "This room will have ghosts coming in at night." Tang Junhe shrank his neck, choked with sobs and whispered, "You lied." "Really?" Yang Xian said mysteriously, making it seem like that, "The one coming in through that window can't see the shadow, it's so big, you don't even need to open the window to come in, and there's no sound." "I'm not afraid." Tang Junhe shrank into the quilt in fright. Yang Xian's trick succeeded, and he patted him across the quilt like a little adult, and comforted him, "Don't be afraid, I've become good friends with him. Hula hula mau, don't be scared." Before he could say a few words of comfort, he himself, as soon as he fell down, he fell asleep first. Tang Junhe was so scared that he fell asleep half the night. Before falling asleep, he thought in a daze, "This place is too scary, and this little brother is too scary, he has to find a way to escape." Tang Xiaonian doesn't want him anymore, he wants to run out to find Tang Xiaonian by himself. After lunch at noon the next day, he lay on the bed and squinted his eyes, pretending to be asleep. When Yang Chengchuan finally went to work, Yang Xian hadn't woken up from his afternoon nap, so he tiptoed out of bed, walked to the door, unlocked the door, and escaped secretly. He went downstairs, fearing that someone would chase him, so he didn't even have time to tell the direction, so he ran wildly for a while, stopped after running for a long time, and began to walk along the side of the road. While walking, panting, he recalled the route he had taken the day before yesterday, but as a result, he walked and walked until he got lost. Yang Xian woke up from a nap, refreshed his energy, and wanted to scare Tang Junhe, but unexpectedly searched the house, even the bottom of the bed, but still couldn't find it. He was lying on the floor, his head moved, and an ominous premonition welled up in his heart. "Oh no, the little crying bag ran away." Yang Xian is an out-and-out brat, but he already has a sense of responsibility at a young age. Since his father handed over his younger brother to him to look after him, he can't lose him. He quickly got up from the floor, ran downstairs in a hurry, looked around, ran to the grandmas in the corner of the building, and asked them if they saw a white, small, the little boy who grew to his chin ran out. "There is one," one of the grandmas pointed him in the direction, running towards that. Ouch! He ran very fast, his two calves looked like clockwork. Before grandma could finish speaking, Yang Xian said "Thank you grandma" and hurried away in that direction like the wind. Tang Junhe is still walking non-stop, he feels like he has come to a big maze, no matter how he walks, he can't get out, no matter how he walks, he seems to be going around in circles, he can't find Tang Xiaonian, and he can't remember to go back way. He was panting and sweating from exhaustion, but every time he walked for a while, he would return to the entrance of a shopping mall, where there were two huge transformers standing there, staring at him upright. Watching the adults coming and going on the street, Tang Junhe recalled the stories of child abduction and trafficking that Tang Xiaonian had told him before. Tears came out of his eyes as he walked. He held back his tears, not letting himself cry, and whispered to himself, "I will definitely find my mother, I will definitely find my mother." Until it was dark, his legs were no longer his own. Watching the sky darken little by little, Tang Junhe sat on the side of the road in despair, and finally started crying, wiping his tears with his little hands. A well-meaning passerby stopped to ask him if he was lost, but he kept shaking his head and refused to say anything. Tang Xiaonian told him that if he can't find his mother, he must not talk to strangers, just wait where he is, and his mother will come back to find him. "But where is mother?" The more Tang Junhee thought about it, the more sad he became. He couldn't help thinking about his future life, which might be begging along the side of the road and being a dirty little beggar. Yang Xian was sweating profusely from running, and almost ran the entire downtown of Tea City, but he couldn't find his new brother. When it was dark, he also remembered the story of child abduction and trafficking that his mother had told, and was so anxious that he almost cried. If my younger brother is really lost, it must be his own responsibility, Yang Xian thought to himself. He was the one who scared him away. What should I do? He ran around the road anxiously, wanting to call Tang Junhee's name, but he couldn't remember those 3 words, so he could only call brother loudly. Little Tang Junhee was tired and hungry, sitting on the side of the road in despair, thinking that he would never see Tang Xiaonian again, and was crying silently, when he suddenly heard brother brother from a distance. Although he still didn't fully remember Yang Xian's voice, he immediately remembered the bad little brother who had been scaring him for the past 2 days. At this moment, he completely forgot the bad deeds Yang Xian had done to him, stood up abruptly, and cried, I'm here brother. Yang Xian had run out of strength, and when he heard Tang Junhee's voice, he became more excited, ran to Tang Junhee's side a few steps, and said in surprise and joy, I found you. Tang Junhee burst into tears, terribly wronged. His hands were dirty, and he wiped himself into a little cat. Yang Xian bowed his head to wipe his tears with guilt. Stop crying, I'm sorry brother. Tang Junhee didn't speak, crying out of breath. Yang Xian took his hand and led him home. Tang Junhee cried all the way. After returning home, Yang Xian was afraid that he would sue Yang Chengchuan at night, so he comforted him like a little adult, and even took a white towel to wipe his face. But Tang Junhee was still crying and couldn't stop crying. Yang Xian was at a loss and said, Don't cry, we're home, why are you crying? Tang Junhee burped and said, I'm hungry. I walked all afternoon. I'm so hungry. Then I'll cook for you, don't cry. Yang Xian said. Yang Xian is only 6 years old. He can only fry eggs in the very small frying pan his mother bought him. He fried all the remaining 5 eggs in the refrigerator, and put a fried egg in a small plate. Some were not yet cooked, some were burnt, and pushed them all in front of Tang Junhee. Seeing the food, Tang Junhee finally calmed down and stopped crying. He wiped away his tears, sniffed his nose, and began to eat the fried eggs that Yang Xian had cooked for him. After eating 3.5, he started crying again. Yang Xian's head grew big, and he said, Why are you crying again? Tang Junhee cried and said, It's too much, I can't eat it. Yang Xian stared at him, If you can't eat it, don't eat it. Tang Junhee cried and said, It will be a waste of food if you don't eat it. Yang Xian pulled the small porcelain plate in front of Tang Junhee and said, Then I'll eat it, and I'm going to starve to death. After speaking, he ate the remaining 1.5 eggs in 2 bites. He was so windy, he ate so fast, he was stunned by Junhee, he forgot to cry for a while, and said with tears in his eyes, You eat so fast. Yang Xian blinked his big sincere eyes, looked at Junhee and said, I found you and took you home, and I also cooked for you, and helped you eat the leftovers you couldn't eat, how about me? Junhee thought about it seriously, and said, It was good just now. Yang Xian became anxious, slapped the table and shouted, Is it just right? Tang Junhee was frightened by his yelling, and dodged his eyes and said, It's not good if you keep scaring me. Yang Xian waved his little hand, I won't scare you anymore. Tang Junhee looked at him timidly, obviously not convinced. His 2 eyeballs are like 2 round black agates, clearly reflecting Yang Xian on them. Really? Yang Xian hesitated, then, don't tell my dad for a while, I will lose you this afternoon. Tang Junhee looked at him, bargaining childishly, If you don't scare me in the future, I won't tell. I will definitely not scare you in the future. Yang Xian vowed, pinching Tang Junhee's face and asked, What's your name? I was looking for you just now, and I wanted to call you by your name, but I just couldn't remember it. Tang Junhee said it honestly, and Yang Xian repeated it several times, saying, "Why is it so hard to remember? Forget it, I'll call you brother." After this happened, Tang Junhee began to cling to Yang Xian. He is not familiar with Runchan's place of life, coupled with the psychological shadow brought about by lost this time, he never leaves Yang Xian. Although the two are only 1 year apart, Yang Xian looks much older than Junhee. Tang Junhee grew up later than other children of the same age, and he is not talkative. But Yang Xian is a king of children, and he has established a majesty among the children around him at a young age. He was also taller than his peers, his legs were long and straight, and he disappeared as soon as he ran. In the first few times, when Tang Junhee went out to play with him, he always had to look for his brother in a panic after a while. Later, he knew that Yang Xian would come back to look for him after running for a while, so he stood obediently and waited for Yang Xian. Tang Junhee's hair was soft, his face was white, and his flesh was plump. Yang Xian always went up and touched his dirty hands. After playing for a day, his face was clean, but Tang Junhee became a dirty child. After being scolded by Yang Chengchuan several times, every time Yang Xian brought Tang Junhee home, he would wipe his face with a towel. In Yang Xian's eyes, Tang Junhee is not his good friend, nor his younger brother, but his little toy. Half a month later, Tang Junhee was still wary of Yang Chengchuan, and he refused to call him father, but he was very clingy to Yang Xian, one brother at a time. On the day Tang Junhee was sent away, Yang Xian stood downstairs to see him off, watched him being carried into the car by Yang Chengchuan, and said goodbye to his brother sensibly. "Okay, you go home," Yang Chengchuan said to Yang Xian before getting into the car, "close the door yourself, I'll take my brother back to his home first, and I'll be back later." "Oh!" Yang Xian was dejected, reluctant to let go, and suddenly remembered something, his eyes lit up, and he said, "Dad, wait a minute, I'll go back and get something." Yang Chengchuan got into the car and fastened his seat belt, but Yang Xian hadn't come out yet. Seeing that it was getting dark, he started the car and slowly drove away from the gate of the community. Tang Junhee turned his head and looked back, he was still waiting for Yang Xian. Yang Xian would definitely come out. But he didn't dare to ask Yang Chengchuan to stop the car. To him, Yang Chengchuan was still a stranger. The car drove 200 meters, and Tang Junhee saw Yang Xian running out from the gate of the community, and ran towards their direction. "Brother!" Tang Junhee shouted. Yang Chengchuan, who was sitting in the driver's seat and driving, was stunned for a moment. This little son hadn't spoken so loudly in front of him before, and he turned his head back. "What's wrong, Junhee?" "Brother is chasing us." Tang Junhee knelt on the back seat of the car, slapped the rear window excitedly, turned his head and shouted at Yang Chengchuan, "Uncle, stop the car for a while." This uncle yelled Yang Chengchuan with mixed feelings. He stepped on the brakes, stopped the car, opened the door and went down, and shouted at Yang Xian from a long distance, "Slow down, don't fall down." Yang Xian caught up, gasping for breath, holding a transformer in one hand, breathlessly said, "Here, give this to my brother, let him take it home to play." Tang Junhee sat in the car and wanted to open the door, but he couldn't do it for a long time, and he was sweating anxiously. Yang Chengchuan came over to help him open the car door. Yang Xian came over, his little face was flushed, he stuffed 2 transformers into Junhee's arms, and said generously, "Don't you like to play with this? I give it to you gone." Tang Junhee hugged 2 domineering transformers, wanting but not daring to have them, and not sincerely refusing. "My mother said, you can't just take other people's things." Yang Xian was full of pride. "Your brother said, if you give it to you, you can take it." In this way, Tang Junhee, holding 2 valuable transformers, returned from the bustling city center full of high-rise buildings to the desolate suburbs where demolition was everywhere, and also returned to his mother Tang Xiaonian. After Tang Junhee was sent home, he always grabbed Tang Xiaonian and asked over and over again when he could see his brother again and when he could invite him to play at home. In the first few times, Tang Xiaonian would give him a few symbolic perfunctory words, but after being asked many times, he became a little emotional, and ignored him every time he heard this sentence, and sometimes secretly wiped his tears. In Tang Junhe's Tongjian Wuji's description, Yang Chinchuan's home is a magnificent palace, and Yang Xian is the pampered little prince in the palace. The two transformers that Yang Xian gave to Tang Junhe were quietly placed on the lacquered TV cabinet, staring at the other dilapidated furnishings in the room without any concealment. Tang Xiaonian was watching clothes stalls in the shopping mall, and passed by the children's section of the shopping mall countless times. The toys there were staggeringly expensive. Every time, she hurried past with lowered eyebrows, not daring to stay for a second. The two transformers that Tang Junhe brought back were bigger and more refined than those in the shopping mall, and the price was undoubtedly more expensive, but Yang Chinchuan's son gave away two as soon as he made a move, which made Tang Xiaonian felt more and more aggrieved and shabby. Tang Xiaonian was pregnant at the time, and hurriedly found an old building area in the neighboring city of Runchinj to settle down. There is nothing good here, except for the cheap rent. There are dense, low-rise buildings everywhere, dry and cold in winter, and flooded in summer. Only for a rare moment at noon every day can we see the bright sunshine outside. However, in the past 2 years, with the implementation of the previous policy, this dilapidated old city has been transformed into the territory of Runchinj. Housing prices have risen faster than rockets, and rents have naturally risen as well. This forced Tang Xiaonian to save money on food and expenses. Even when buying toilet paper, he had to stand in front of the supermarket shelves and hesitate for a long time. Tang Xiaonian is not without the opportunity to get rid of poverty. When Yang Chengchuan found this place, the first thing he said was, "Why do you live here? Is this a place where people live? Let's go, I'll find you a place to live, so you won't suffer here." At that time, Tang Xiaonian looked at him with backbone and said, "Go where it came from, who cares about your too stinky money?" In this way, Yang Chinchuan's remaining words were choked back into his stomach. One night, Tang Xiaonian made sweet and sour pork ribs for Tang Junhe. Tang Junhe licked his fingers while eating and said, "Mom, let's ask brother Yang Xian to come and try it next time." When Tang Xiaonian heard it, a feeling of sadness flowed down his esophagus to his throat. She put down her chopsticks, grabbed Tang Junhe's arm and asked him, "Tell Mom, is your brother's house big?" Tang Junhe gestured with his two white lotus root and melon-like arms, "It's so big." Tang Xiaonian asked again, "Does that brother look good in his clothes?" Tang Junhe nodded seriously, "It looks good, and my brother looks good too." Tang Xiaonian suddenly started to cry, patter patter, she turned her face and wiped her tears, and said, "Those should be yours, do you understand?" Tang Junhe naturally didn't understand, but he looked at Tang Xiaonian ignorantly, and nodded timidly. Since that time, Tang Junhe never mentioned Yang Xian in front of Tang Xiaonian again. He knew that as long as his brother was mentioned, his mother would cry, and he couldn't make his mother sad. However, even though he didn't mention it, he still often thinks of Yang Xian. Because of Tang Xiaonian, the other children in the alley were hinted not to play with Tang Junhe. Tang Junhe has no friends, and apart from Tang Xiaonian, no one treats him well. Yang Xian's kindness to him became the only brilliance in his childhood, which set off the bleakness of other days. Tang Junhe thought that he would never see Yang Xian again for the next year. For a 5-year-old child, a year is a long time, enough to forget anything that happened a year ago. But a year has passed, Tang Junhe still remembers Yang Xian. In the summer when he was 6 years old, Tang Junhe saw Yang Xian again. The black car was parked downstairs, and Tang Junhe was led downstairs by Tang Xiaonian's hand. He didn't cry that time, he obediently climbed into the back seat of the car, sat upright and bid farewell to Tang Xiaonian. Tang Xiaonian bought him nice clothes, a grey plaid vest over a white shirt, and a small bow tie around his neck, making him look like a little prince. When Yang Chengchuan brought him upstairs, a neighbor saw him and said in surprise, "Hey, where is such a good-looking little boy?" Yang Chengchuan just smiled and perfunctory, "My colleague is on a business trip, and the child sent me here to stay for a few days." Yang Xian went out to play, and when Yang Chengchuan called him back, his body was dirty. Tang Junhe was sitting restrainedly on the sofa and watching him, afraid that he would not remember himself. As soon as Yang Xian saw Tang Junhe, he rushed over and pinched his face with two dirty hands. Tang Junhe didn't hide, and let him pinch with a smile. Yang Xian has already entered elementary school and has to do summer homework, 1 mat a day. He doesn't like writing himself, so he pushes it to Junhe, who is still in kindergarten, to write, and he even calls it teaching him to read. Tang Junhe didn't resist either, holding the pencil tightly in one small hand, and wrote carefully for him stroke by stroke. Yang Xian tilted his head to watch him write, and suddenly found a new world and said, "So you also use your left hand?" Junhe clenched the pencil tighter all of a sudden, and looked at Yang Xian uneasily, "Isn't that okay?" "Who says it can't be done? I also use my left hand," Yang Xian said nonchalantly, "I won't change unless the teacher tells me to." Junhe felt relieved, and said with puffy face, "Then I won't change." The next day, Yang Xian summoned a group of his friends to play by the river. When he arrived at the shoal by the river, he carried a small bucket in his left hand and a fishing net in his right hand. He rolled up his trouser legs and was about to go into the water to catch fish. Before he went into the water, he turned his head and asked Tang Junhe if he wanted to be with him. Tang Junhe shook his head and refused. He was a little afraid of water. He squatted on the bank by himself, lifted the rock to watch the crab, and when the rock was lifted, the little crab hiding underneath waved its 8 legs and ran fast. He looked interesting, so he wanted to catch one and show it to Yang Xian. He spotted a small crab and stretched out his hand to catch it. The little crab waved its claws to scratch him. He withdrew his hand and looked at the little thing with its teeth and claws eagerly. He didn't dare to make a move for a while, and followed the little crab to the river. An older boy watched Junhe Mao Ya running over, bent down to pick up the small river crab maliciously, and said nothing to him. Junhe was in a hurry to grab it, but the boy deliberately refused to give it to him. Taking advantage of his height, he raised his arms high and pretended to crush the little crab to death. Junhe jumped to pull his arm, but the boy stretched out his hand and pushed him, and accidentally pushed Junhe down on the beach. The shoal extending into the sea sloped slightly, and as soon as Junhe's hit the ground, he rolled down the slope. The corner of his forehead hit a sharp stone protruding from the edge of the sea, his body was submerged by the rushing river water, and he disappeared in the blink of an eye. "Help! Help!" cried the boy who had been in trouble, "Someone's fallen into the water." Fortunately, there was an adult who was fishing next to him, and he quickly went into the water to fish Tang Junhe up, so no one was killed. Because it was caught in time, Tang Junhe only choked on 2 sips of water, but there were no serious problems in other places. After being caught, he didn't cry immediately, but curled up into a small ball as if he was frightened, staring blankly at the calm water in front of him, and shedding tears without saying a word. It's okay," the uncle who picked him up comforted his wet head, then turned his head to look at the boy who caused trouble. "It's dangerous for such a small child to play by the river, you don't have adults follow." The boy was also frightened and stupid, eager to get rid of his responsibility, and said, "He is the one who insisted on grabbing crabs from me." A boy next to him hurriedly said, "He has a brother coming with him, he is Yang Xian's younger brother, I will call brother Xian over." After speaking, he ran in another direction, calling Yang Xian loudly as he ran. Yang Xian was concentrating on catching fish with his trouser legs rolled up, and he didn't know anything about the storm that happened 50 meters away. "Brother Xian! Brother Xian!" The panting child ran over and called his name, and when he got close, he shouted in a panic, "Brother Xian, your brother fell into the water." Ah! Yang Xian didn't hear clearly, he straightened up and looked at the boy running over. Your brother! The boy shouted out of breath, your brother just fell into the water. Yang Xian was stunned for a moment, there was a buzzing sound in his head, the hand holding the red bucket loosened, and there was a bang sound, all the small fish, shrimps and crabs he caught just fell back into the water. He didn't care about these things, asked loudly, have you been rescued? How did you fall into the water? Hurry up and take a look. The boy who ran close bent his knees to look at him, gasping for breath, and said urgently. Yang Xian hurriedly stepped on the water and landed on the shore, not caring about putting on his shoes, and ran back. Brother! Before Yang Xian could get close, his voice came from afar, are you all right? Tang Junhe was lowering his head and silently wiping away his tears. Hearing Yang Xian's voice, he raised his face full of tears and looked at Yang Xian who was running over from a distance, as if a switch in his body was suddenly touched. Like, wow! Cried out. There was a small cut on his forehead, and blood was gurgling, flowing down his white and tender face, looking a little scary. When Yang Xian saw it, he knew that his younger brother was being bullied. He clenched his fists, glared at a group of young boys who were watching, and asked loudly, who bullied him? Immediately someone nearby pointed to the boy, he pushed your brother down. It wasn't me. The boy argued, he insisted before he could speak halfway. Yang Xian had already mustered all his strength, rushed forward and pushed him staggering back 2 steps. Before he could stand still, Yang Xian bent his arms again, and swung hard at his chest, slamming him to the ground. He raised his foot and was about to kick the boy when the adult next to him hurriedly pulled him away and said, don't hit him, he didn't mean to. He did it on purpose. Yang Xian struggled to break free from the adult's hand, I must beat him to death. Your brother's forehead is bleeding, you should take him to the hospital quickly, the adult persuaded calmly, otherwise the wound will be infected, it will be serious, so stop beating him. Unwillingly, Yang Xian stopped, took Tang Junhe's hand, pointed at the boy sitting on the ground and said, you wait for Zhang Xinlong. The half-old child had a vicious tone, and his chest was heaving with anger, which made the adult next to him want to laugh but didn't dare to laugh, for fear that he would jump over and fight with him. This child's fists are not good enough. Big, desperate attitude seems very serious. Yang Xian took his younger brother's hand, thanked the man, asked the direction of the hospital, and led Tang Junhe towards the hospital. Before leaving, he did not forget to give the boy a hard look. Junhe took the tissue given by the adult, covered the wound on his forehead, and sobbed softly behind him. Does it hurt? After walking for a while, Yang Xian stopped, took Junhe's hand away, looked down at the small opening and asked. A little bit. Junhe said. Yang Xian blew 2 breaths towards the small hole, it won't hurt anymore, I'm almost at the hospital. It was almost dusk and it was getting windy. Tang Junhe had just rolled around in the water, and was wet from head to toe. When the wind blew, he shivered firmly. Are you cold? Yang Xian turned to look at him and asked. One thing, Tang Junhe stopped crying and said sensibly, let's go quickly, it won't be cold if we go faster. Take off your clothes. Yang Xian said while pulling Tang Junhe's drenched little t-shirt. Tang Junhe's eyes were wet from crying, he looked at his brother like a puppy, and asked puzzledly, why? Yang Xian didn't say anything, just pulled his clothes, urging him to take them off quickly. Tang Junhe didn't take off his clothes, he didn't want to walk naked on the street. Yang Xian was a little anxious, grabbed Junhe's arm a little rough, helped him take off his clothes without any explanation, then pulled his own t-shirt, pulled it off from his head, put it on Junhe's head, and said, wear mine. Then what are you wearing? Junhe grabbed Yang Xian's clothes and put them around his neck and looked at him and asked. I wear yours, I'm hot. Yang Xian said, and put Junhe's clothes on himself in the blink of an eye. Tang Junhe was a head shorter than him, and the clothes were naturally smaller by more than one size. Yang Xian barely put it on, and turned the t-shirt into a navel-bearing outfit, revealing a section of his white belly. Tang Junhee was amused by his appearance, watching him giggle endlessly. "Hurry up and wear yours." Yang Xian grabbed his arm, stuffed him into his t-shirt, reached out and hit his head again, and said fiercely, "Don't laugh. Brother, why are you so kind to me?" Tang Junhee put on Yang Xian's clothes and said from the bottom of his heart, "It would be great if you were my own brother." Yang Xian took his hand and said casually, "I am your brother." After arriving at the hospital, Yang Xian led Tang Junhee into the hall, looking around at a loss. A young nurse noticed the two strangely dressed children, walked over and bent over and asked, "What's wrong with the children? Are you looking for someone?" "My brother is injured." Yang Xian took Tang Junhee's hand off his forehead. The forehead was broken. "Oh, so much blood," the nurse said distressfully when she saw the blood-stained tissue in Junhee's hand. Come, sister, ask a doctor to bandage you." Yang Xian accompanied Tang Junhee to the children's ward, watched the doctor begin to treat his wound, quietly tugged at the corner of the nurse's clothes, and whispered, "Sister, I didn't bring any money, go back and get it now. Will you watch over my brother for me?" He spoke like a little grown-up. The nurse looked funny, nodded and said with a smile, "You don't worry, leave your brother to me." The hospital was 2 kilometers away from home. Yang Xian ran back quickly, not daring to rest for a second. When he got home, he dug out his bare piggy bank, carried it and ran back, without even bothering to change his clothes. When he ran back to the hospital out of breath, his clothes were almost dry. Junhee bandaged the wound and sat on the seat designated by the nurse sister to wait for his brother. He was a little sleepy and was dozing off against the wall. Seeing Yang Xian coming back, the nurse came over to tease him, "Why are you wearing such small clothes?" "This is his clothes." Yang Xian pointed to Tang Junhee in the corner. "He fell into the water and his clothes were all wet." "Sister, how much do I have to pay?" He twisted the head of the bare piggy bank off, and took out a wad of money from it. "What are you doing with so much money?" The nurse looked at the pile of 100 yuan rolled up in his hand, and quickly pulled Yang Xian aside. "Hurry up and hide it well, or someone else will it away if they see it." "No one dares to me," Yang Xian said fearlessly. Seeing that he was young, the nurse held back a smile and asked, "Is that your brother?" Yang Xian nodded. The nurse took him to pay the money. On the way, he deliberately teased him and said, "Your brother just lost a lot of blood and needs a blood transfusion. We have no blood here. What do you think?" Yang Xian looked back at Junhee's direction in doubt. "Isn't he already bandaged?" "Blood transfusion is needed after the bandage is done," the nurse fooled him solemnly. "You see that he is listless and dozing off. Would you like to transfuse your blood to your brother?" Yang Xian raised his arm without hesitation and said, "Let's lose. I have a lot of blood, and I can share half of it with him." "I lied to you." The nurse covered her mouth and smiled, "Why are you so cute?" Yang Xian was not angry, and corrected her, "I'm not cute, I'm handsome, and my brother is cute." That night, Yang Chengchuan saw the thick gauze on Tang Junhee's forehead, and after asking the reason, he held Yang Xian's neck, pointed at his butt, and couldn't help but give him a fat beating, and asked him while beating, "Do you still want to go to the river to play in the future? It's up to you. If you don't let you go, you dare to take your brother there." Yang Xian didn't say a word, his neck was stuck and he refused to shed tears. After being beaten, he didn't eat 2 bites of dinner, and went back to his room to sulk, and he didn't know what he was angry about. As soon as he left, Junhee was not in the mood to eat any more. He turned his head frequently, and his thoughts flew from the meal to behind the closed door. Yang Chengchuan put food in Tang Junhee's bowl and said, "It doesn't matter what he eats if he makes a mistake. Come to Junhee, let's eat ours and eat more." Tang Junhee lowered his head and muttered, "It's not my brother who wants to take me to the river, but I insist on letting him take me there." Yang Chengchuan didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He didn't expect that the two sons had learned to take the blame for each other before they had been together for 20 days from birth to now. He patted Junhee on the head and said, "Do you like brother?" Junhee nodded, "I like it." Yang Chengchuan lowered his voice again and asked, "Then do you like dad?" Junhee looked up at him with some resistance in his eyes. Yang Chengchuan's heart suddenly turned cold. His youngest son knew that he was his father, but he just didn't want to recognize him. Holding the slightest hope, he said softly to Junhee, "Call me dad, I will take you to play by the river tomorrow and buy you transformers, okay?" Junhee shook his head without any hesitation. Yang Chengchuan sighed. Tang Junhee put the chopsticks on the dining table and said, "I'm full." Then he jumped off the chair, walked towards the closed door, pushed it open, walked in, and then closed the door again. Yang Xian was lying on the wooden floor playing Lego, looking sullen, and didn't look up when he heard Junhee walk in. Tang Junhee leaned over, lay down next to him, called his brother in a low voice, and said sorry. Yang Xian pursed his lips and said, "What are you sorry for?" Tang Junhee said, "I caused you to be beaten by your father. I also caused you to bleed a lot, we are even." Tang Junhee had nothing to say, and silently accompanied Yang Xian to build Lego. "Will your father beat you?" Yang Xian asked suddenly. "I don't have a father," Tang Junhee said, "I only have a mother, named Tang Xiaonian, and she would beat me too." His tone was so ordinary that Yang Xian didn't realize that not having a father was a very serious matter. He just repeated Tang Xiaonian's name and commented, "Tang Xiaonian, your mother's name is more you are easy to remember." Yang Chengchuan was on vacation on the weekend, and took his two boys to the playground for a day. While waiting boredly, the conductor at the side came up to him and said, "Are those your two sons? How old are they?" Yang Chengchuan said, "The older one is 7 years old, and the younger one is 6 years old." "You look really good," the man said enviously, "you look like a talented person with good genes, so I can't be envious." Yang Chengchuan's appearance is very deceptive, his appearance is very deceptive. After hearing this, he humbly said, "What's there, but he was happy in his heart. When the two sons came running one after the other, he carried one of them by the hand and took them to the mall, where he bought two identical clothes. A denim jacket with a plaid shirt, and a baseball bat on their heads. The two little guys are all hip-hop. Yang Chengchuan follows behind, watching the two sons, one big and one small, running and frolicking in front. The depression in his heart a few days ago sweep away. Because of these two identical clothes, Tang Junhee never saw Yang Xian again in the next 10 years. The sky was slightly cloudy that afternoon, and cumulonimbus clouds were piled up on the horizon, moving slowly westward with the wind direction. It is not difficult to imagine that there will be a downpour in the future. Yang Xian was teaching Tang Junhee the origami airplane in the living room. At first, Junhee didn't want him to teach, so he grabbed the paper and said that he could fold it himself. He quickly folded a paper airplane, using the simplest folding method. "Look, I can fold it." He put the paper airplane in his palm and brought it in front of Yang Xian to claim credit. "Oh," Yang Xian didn't even look at it, "I know 12 kinds, and I wanted to teach you, but since you know how to fold, forget it." Tang Junhee looked at the piece of paper in Yang Xian's hand, he folded it over and over again, and finally folded it into a very powerful-looking plane. Yang Xian took the paper airplane, let out a few breaths at it, raised his arms confidently, and threw it far away. The paper airplane flew up, very high and far away, and flew out of the window. Wow! Tang Junhee was stunned, and pulled Yang Xian's arm and begged him, "Brother, teach me. Didn't you say you would?" Yang Xian raised his chin and looked at him. "I won't," Tang Junhee said honestly, "none of those people in the kindergarten." "I knew it," Yang Xian's tone was showing off, "come on, I'll teach you." He taught Tang Junhee step by step, letting him fold along with him, and the whole process was patient. Jun Hyuk is also very smart, he learned it after only teaching it once. Holding the folded paper airplane, he followed Yang Xian's example, heaved 2 breaths at the tail of the airplane, raised his arms high, and made a full posture. Suddenly there was a crackling sound from the door lock outside. Tang Junhee maintained his movements and turned his head to ask Yang Xian, "Who's here?" "Who else is there, my dad?" Yang Xian said, "Don't worry about it, just throw it away." Tang Junhee threw the paper airplane out. The moment it was thrown out, the door of the house was pushed open, and then a tall, thin woman walked in. The paper plane flew straight forward, hit the woman, was caught by her, and held it in her hand. Before Tang Junhee could react, he stared blankly at the sudden stranger, while Yang Xian happily called out "Mom," then jumped off the sofa without hesitation, rushed forward, and threw himself at him. Mother's arms. Many years later, Tang Junhee's memory of that scene is already very vague. He only remembered that the woman was tall and beautiful, but she had a sickly look on her face, always looking unhappy. He remembered that woman came over and asked him his name, who was his father, who was his mother, how old was he this year, where was his family, where did he go to school, and how many days he had been here. When she asked these questions, there was obviously no expression on her face, and her voice was obviously gentle, but Junhee felt a wave of fear for no reason. "Mom, stop asking." Yang Xian was lying on the sofa with his head resting on her lap, acting like a spoiled child. "Why are you asking these questions? You go to the study to do your homework," the woman said, still speaking softly. "Mom has some questions for your brother." "I don't," Yang Xian said, "I don't like doing homework." As he said this, he was pulled by the arm by the woman and led to the study next to him, where he was locked in. Tang Junhee remembered that after he finished answering those questions, the woman took out her mobile phone from the bag beside her, walked to the windowsill, and yelled something emotionally at the mobile phone, with Yang Chinchuan's name frequently mixed in her words. Tang Junhee also remembered that when the woman came out, her face was covered with tears, very similar to his mother Tang Xiaonian crying. It started to rain outside, and the raindrops slammed on the window fiercely, crackling into one piece, as dense as a high-spirited drumbeat, as if heralding the next variation. Not long after, Yang Chengchuan rushed back in a panic. His whole body was wet by the rain, and the hair on his forehead was wet into locks, looking a bit embarrassed. There was a very fierce dispute between them, or maybe it was not a dispute, but one was arguing hysterically, and the other was evasively defending. Tang Junhee didn't understand what happened. He huddled in the corner of the sofa, even panting carefully. He heard a loud knock on the door from the study room, and Yang Xian shouted "Dad" and "Mom" loudly inside. His voice broke. He could imagine Yang Xian's anxious appearance at the door, but he dared not go over and open the door for him. That afternoon, Tang Junhee was sent back home, perhaps because he was frightened, and when he was sent to Tang Xiaonian, he had already developed a high fever. He didn't remember Tang Xiaonian's expression at that time, nor what she said, but he vaguely felt that Tang Xiaonian seemed to be crying too, because there seemed to be cold tears falling on his hot forehead, chilling him. I shivered. Later, Tang Junhee went to elementary school and learned idioms, so he realized what happened that afternoon was called Dongchuang incident. And the last touch of color that Yang Xian brought to his childhood was dappled by the heavy rain that afternoon, and added a layer of blurred filter by the menacing high fever. Looking back, although it is no longer very clear, but very attractive beauty. The doorbell rang like a death call, but the two people in the room had no intention of moving their buttocks. Their eyes were fixed on the screen in front of them, and they were engaged in a not too intense competition. One of them was cursing. "What kind of props did you use? How could you catch up so quickly? Crap, crap, is my remote control broken?" Another voice was careless. "What kind of props? Your cornering skills are too weak, I want to overtake." "Fuck, don't overtake me, let me win, Yang Xian." Yang Xian acted as if he had never heard of it, and passed by without blinking his eyes. Playing a game on the sofa will make you fall apart, and your mobile phone rang. Day. Feng Bo squeezed out 2 words through gritted teeth, leaned over to take the phone from the coffee table, and said angrily, "Hey, who is it?" His tone took a 180-degree turn in the next second. Oh, Uncle Yang, that's right, Yang Xian is at my house. You were the one who knocked on the door just now, I'll open it for you now, I'll open it for you now. Feng Bo turned his face and mouthed to Yang Xian, "Your father." Then he looked down for slippers all over the floor. Yang Xian kicked one to him, and he put it on, but couldn't find the second one, so he had to tiptoe to open the door with his left foot. "Uncle Yang, I'm sorry, Yang Xian and I were discussing homework just now." The argument was a bit heated. "I didn't hear the doorbell ring." I'm sorry. Yang Chengchuan looked at Feng Bo, who had a playful smile in front of him, and sighed, "If you two can discuss homework one day, it will be the 8th wonder of the world." "Yang Xian, stop playing and come home with me." Yang Xian didn't even lift his eyelids. He opened a new game and started to play. "Which family is it?" Yang Chengchuan couldn't hold back his face, and said with a bad face, "Come out quickly, your aunt and your brother are here for the first time today, don't always be so ignorant." Yang Xian stared at the screen expressionlessly. "I don't have an aunt or brother, that's not my home." Yang Chengchuan pushed the door in angrily, pulled Yang Xian's arm and pulled it out. "If you want to show you a good face, you will put your face on your face. I came here to pick you up, not to discuss with you." Impatiently, Yang Xian flicked his arm, shook off Yang Chengchuan's hand that was holding him, then threw the remote control aside, stood up and looked at Yang Chengchuan. He is half a head taller than Yang Chengchuan, and his frame is strong and tall. Although his muscles are not so obvious because he has been jointed too quickly in the past 2 years, he is even taller than his father in terms of momentum just by punching that way. "Cut!" Yang Chengchuan forced his father's majesty, pulled his arm again, frowned and said, "Why, you still want to fight with me? Go home, hurry up." Feng Bo was too frightened to make a sound, and stood timidly by the door, winking at Yang Xian. Yang Xian turned a blind eye to it, shook off Yang Chengchuan's hand again, bent down to pick up the coat that was on the side, and went out ahead of him. "Okay, come back as soon as you come back. What does it mean to put your nose on your face? I can demonstrate it to you personally." Seeing the father and son, who were at odds with each other, walk out the door, Feng Bo shrank his neck and stammered, Uncle, come again." Yang Xian put on his coat while walking, walked straight to the black car parked downstairs, opened the rear door, and sat in. Yang Chengchuan got in the car and gave him a seat belt while scolding him, "There is still half a semester to go to the 3rd year of high school, and I run around the street with the identity of a sports student on my back every day. You don't think it's embarrassing, but I don't. It's just a matter of changing your son to give you a long face." Yang Xian choked on him, pulled up his hat, leaned his head on the back of the car seat and pretended to be asleep. Yang Chengchuan's face was not very good looking, and he tried his best to suppress his anger and said, "Xiao Xian, your mother is gone, I don't feel better than you, but it's been 2 years, you should be sensible, people can't always live in the past, you have to learn to grow. Grow up like you." Yang Xian smiled with his eyes closed, and mockingly said, "You don't have to place such high hopes on me, I can't." Tang Junhe sat at the dining table, looking at the room with some curiosity. This is not the room he came to 10 years ago, it looks very strange. The house with 4 bedrooms and 2 living rooms is not very tidy, it can be seen that it has been tidied up temporarily to support the scene. More than an hour ago, Yang Chengchuan took him and Tang Xiaonian to visit each room except for Yang Xian's room, which was locked tightly, no one could get in. His mother, Tang Xiaonian, has quickly adapted to her new identity in just over an hour, busying herself in the kitchen, acting like the hostess of the house. Tang Junhee didn't know what ecstasy soup Yang Chengchuan gave his mother to make Tang Xiaonian suddenly change his mind after scolding him for more than 10 years, and marry him willingly. I'm getting married. At the dinner table that night, Tang Xiaonian calmly announced the news to Tang Junhee. Her tone sounded like she was just stating the facts, not asking for Tang Junhee's opinion. Tang Junhee froze for a moment, then asked, "With whom?" "Your biological father," Tang Xiaonian said, "Yang Chengchuan." Although the fact that Yang Chengchuan is Tang Junhee's biological father was tacitly shared between the mother and son, Tang Xiaonian had never explicitly mentioned it in front of Tang Junhee in more than 10 years. This was the first time. Why? Tang Junhee asked again. He really didn't understand. There is no reason. His wife died 2 years ago. He came to propose to me 2 months ago, and I agreed. Tang Xiaonian stretched out his hand and brushed his hair behind his ear. It's an adult's business, you are a child. Don't worry about it. I don't agree. Tang Junhee looked at his mother. I didn't ask you to agree. Tang Xiaonian tapped the edge of the plate with his chopsticks and said, "Let's eat." Tang Xiaonian has always been very stubborn, the kind of stubbornness that says nothing. More than 10 years ago, she took the initiative to give birth to Tang Junhee without discussing it with anyone. At that time, she had a big belly and brought supplements bought from the city back to the village to visit her mother. After rushing out, she bent down with difficulty, picked up the scattered things back into the bag, put them at her mother's door, and returned back the same way with a big belly. More than 10 years later, she married Yang Chengchuan, who betrayed her back then on her own initiative, and she still didn't intend to discuss it with anyone, not even listening to the opinion of her precious son in her palm. Everyone said that Tang Junhee was like Tang Xiaonian, both in looks and personality, even the stubbornness in his body was exactly the same. Because of the announcement of this news, the relationship between mother and child suddenly became a little strange, as if a barrier had been squeezed into it. But no one tried to pierce the diaphragm. Tang Junhee looked at the busy figure in the kitchen, and even thought a little darkly, maybe his mother had imagined this scene countless times. After waiting for more than 10 years to get through the door, now that the dream has come true, it is natural to be able to do it with ease. Tang Junhee doesn't like this place, doesn't like that Yang Chengchuan, and doesn't like this Tang Xiaonian who has a new identity. He was just a little curious about Yang Xian. He didn't know what that elder brother who looked like a little model since childhood looked like now. But the headache is that Yang Xian probably doesn't welcome him and Tang Xiaonian. Tang Xiaonian showed her peak culinary skills, and completed 4 dishes and 1 soup in just over an hour. "Come here and serve the food." Tang Xiaonian yelled from the kitchen, and when Tang Junhee entered the kitchen, she asked again, "Haven't you come back yet? It took so long to pick someone up, your dad." Tang Junhee picked up the plate and left, saying, "I don't have a father." Tang Xiaonian was caught off guard and interrupted, not only didn't get angry, but smiled lightly. She stood in a daze for a moment, then took her chopsticks and walked towards the living room. "Forget it, if you don't like barking, don't bark." She looked up at the wall clock on the wall. "It's almost 1 o'clock, are you hungry? Put some in a small bowl for you, you eat first." "Not hungry." Tang Junhee said so. Tang Xiaonian still brought a small bowl from the kitchen, and said to himself while picking up vegetables, "You just need to be more polite to them, especially your brother. I heard from Yang Chengchuan that his grades are not good and he always fights." Before that, he entered the police station because of the fights and was almost detained. "He will not be happy if we live in like this. I plan to discuss it with Yang Chengchuan. Let's see if we can let him live on campus, so that we can be more comfortable, and he can be more comfortable." "I told you I'm not hungry." Tang Junhee interrupted her in a low voice, then said after a pause, "This is his house, and I will live on campus if I want to live." "You thought it was when you were young," Tang Xiaonian sighed. "Don't be so big-hearted, no one can tell what he thinks of us." "Then you shouldn't have sent me here back then, and you shouldn't have married me now." Tang Junhee said coldly. I didn't do that for your own good back then. Tang Xiaonian raised his voice reflexively, and then turned off the ignition automatically. Okay, I won't quarrel with you, just remember, what's going on now. It was supposed to be yours, but it was a little late. You can eat these first, and I will clean up the kitchen. After speaking, he put the small bowl in front of Tang Junhee, turned and entered the kitchen. I don't know if it's because I'm hungry or in a bad mood, but Tang Junhee has no appetite at all for this table of fairly sumptuous dishes. He didn't understand why Tang Xiaonian had to marry here. The mother and son had a good life before, but they decided to move here to see how people look. No need to guess what Yang Xian would think of them, Xiaosan, and Xiaosan's son, who is to blame. This is well deserved. Tang Junhee picked up his chopsticks, intending to finish his meal early, and then he could leave early in a while. If you think about it, you will know how embarrassing the next scene will be. The door was kicked open. The force was not heavy, but the kick contained a lot of emotions. Tang Junhee raised his head when he heard the sound, and saw that person. To be precise, it should be the boy leaning against the door frame, looking at himself inexplicably, so he looked back without showing any timidity. The man was tall and thin, he looked about 1.8 meters tall, and he didn't look very strong. In the cold winter, he only wore a thin black cotton coat, which wrapped the vigorously growing bones underneath. The chill seemed to be able to penetrate through a distance of several meters. His eye sockets were slightly deep, and there seemed to be sharp icicles in his eyes. When he looked over, he opened his mouth after looking at him enough, and said without a tone, "Long time no see." Tang Junhee just looked at him expressionlessly and didn't respond. The man pulled up the corners of his mouth and smiled. It wasn't a kind smile. Then he straightened up from the door frame, walked to his room, unlocked it, and then closed the door again. Yang Chengchuan walked in immediately, took off his coat and hung it on the coat hook on one side, and said to Tang Junhee, "Is Junhee hungry? Come, let's eat, hey? Where is Yang Xian? Didn't he come up first?" Before Tang Junhee opened his mouth, there were several bang 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 noises from the room over there. Yang Chengchuan frowned, walked towards Yang Xian's room, first twisted the doorknob twice and tried to open the door, but failed. He knocked on the door twice and said, "Yang Xian, come out for dinner." There was no response from inside, and there were continuous bang bang sounds, as if the house was being demolished. At this moment, Tang Xiaonian heard the sound outside, quickly rinsed the spatula in his hand, wiped his hands and came out, and said to Yang Chengchuan, "You're back? Where's Xiao Xian?" Yang Chengchuan didn't answer, and began to scold Yang Xian through the door, but he still said a few words. "Auntie and brother are here, you should be sensible, let's put everything else aside, and we can talk about it after we come out for a meal." Tang Xiaonian, the newly appointed hostess, showed a little restraint at this moment, stood there for a moment of hesitation, and then stepped forward and echoed, "Xiao Xian, Auntie made something delicious for you, come out and taste it." Tang Junhee glanced over there, picked up the chopsticks and started eating the dishes in the small bowl. The tightly closed door was suddenly pulled open, startling Tang Xiaonian, who was hesitating to knock on the door, and subconsciously took a step back, looking up at the unfriendly expression in front of him, who was more than a head taller than him. "Boy!" Yang Xian's eyes quickly scanned the two of them a few times, then fell on Yang Chengchuan's face, and said, "There is room for you, you can place it as you like." After speaking, he dragged the trolley case and walked towards the gate. Yang Chengchuan followed him, trying to drag him back, but he couldn't catch him, so he had to run downstairs after him. Tang Xiaonian walked to the dining table and sat down, maybe a little scared. She breathed a sigh of relief, and said, "You see, it seems like I have a grudge against me, and I don't owe him anything. The face of the robbed will see what is being robbed." These words were meant for Tang Junhee, but Tang Junhee's left ear went in and out of his right ear, and he didn't go into his head. He still hasn't been able to fully connect Yang Xian with the rebellious boy just now. Yang Xian is obviously the one with the hair standing up, who looks like a little model, who always calls him brother and likes to tease him covering his bare child. Seeing that he was absent-minded, Tang Xiaonian warned again, "Tell you to stay away from him, do you hear me?" Tang Junhe lowered his head while eating and said perfunctorily, "Got it." After a few minutes, Yang Chengchuan came up by himself. His expression looked a little annoyed. He sat down at the dining table with a frown and said, "Leave him alone, let's eat." As he said, he put a chopstick in Tang Junhe's bowl. "Come on Junhe, eat more." Tang Junhe put down his chopsticks and said politely, "Thank you Uncle Yang, I'm full, I'm going to clean up the room first." Before Yang Chengchuan could retract his hand, he froze in midair in embarrassment. Tang Xiaonian reached out and pulled Tang Junhe's arm, and said, "You're full after just a few bites, eat more." Tang Junhe got up and said, "I'm really full." Then he turned and went back to his room, and locked the door from the inside. "He's just like this, ignorant, and I've been spoiled by me since he was a child." Tang Xiaonian smiled at Yang Chengchuan, with no sign of reproach on his face. "Don't blame the child, blame me." Yang Chengchuan put vegetables into Tang Xiaonian's bowl. "It's all retribution, I deserve it." Tang Xiaonian bit his chopsticks and remained silent. As soon as he entered the door, Tang Junhe fell on the bed with his head up, reached out and took the pillow beside him to cover his face. "Want to get out of here, right now, right now." Irritable at the slightest point, "I don't want to listen to Yang Chengchuan, and I don't want to listen to Tang Xiaonian." He got up and opened the window, and the howling north wind blew in violently, blowing away the warmth in the room in an instant, and only then did he feel the breath that was blocked in his chest ease. Tang Junhe just lay there, letting the north wind of -8 degrees blow him down. In fact, he doesn't miss his old home at all, the dark corridors, the aluminum alloy windows that leak air on all sides, the neighbors who talk sarcastically, and the soundproofing where you can hear the sound of bed calls from 3 floors away, all of them are extremely annoying. But that didn't stop him from hating it just as much. Feng Bo was practicing cornering skills with the game console at home. When there was a knock on the door, he knew it was Yang Xian, only Yang Xian didn't like to ring the doorbell. He put down the remote control to open the door, and said in surprise, "You're back so soon. I'm just going to get my luggage. I guess I'll be staying at your house for a few more days." Yang Xian pulled off his hat and brushed his hair casually. "Shut it up." Feng Bo said in a repeated voice, "It happens that my father doesn't love my mother or love me, and I stay alone in the empty room with no one to accompany me." He took Yang Xian's suitcase, only to find that he had lunch in his hand, shouted happily, "Oh my god, small crab roe wontons! Brother Xian, you are my real brother. Get out, don't mention the word brother to me." Yang Xian sat down on the sofa, picked up the remote control and said while playing with it, "You are trying to find trouble for me. Don't talk, hey, why did you bring back a copy? You don't want to eat?" "I ate in the store." "Oh." Feng Bo sat down, opened the takeaway box, and asked, "Your father took you there with great difficulty, and let you come back so easily?" A new game started on the screen, and Yang Xian manipulated the controller and let out a "Hey! Hey, it's just this corner. I just practiced for a long time and couldn't do it." Feng Bo leaned over holding the lunch box. "How did you pass so smoothly?" "Slow down a little bit." Yang Xian stared at the screen as the racing car passed the curve smoothly, and said, "You have to control the angle of the handle well. Obviously I've lived like this too." Feng Bo was puzzled. "Hey, let's try changing places later." "Yeah." Yang Xian quickly ended the round, put the remote control aside, smoked a cigarette from the cigarette box on the coffee table, lit it with a lighter, and took a puff. "Did you see your younger brother just now? How is it? Didn't you two have a good time when you were young?" Feng Bo asked after taking a sip of soup with his lunch box in his arms. "What else can I do? Yang Xian leaned his head back on the sofa chair, exhaled and said, "Just like when I was a child, rush up and hug him and call him brother. Your dad is really good, he's already at this age, and he got married again, so he can find a young one. Feng Bo is a real dude, and he has never said anything." The third in command. Yang Xian didn't mind what he said, but just said, "My dad is a scumbag. He married this. I don't know how many people are out there. I guess he just enjoys the feeling of the red flag at home and the colorful flags fluttering outside." Hearing what he said, Feng Bo laughed a few times and said, "Hey, that girl," he pointed to Tang Xiaonian, "is she your mother? Her son is 10 months younger than me, that is to say, when I was just born, she was just pregnant, and when my mother was pregnant, she hooked up with my dad. Anyway, it's Yang Xian." Straight standing up, he pulled the ashtray on the table, tapped the ash and said, "It's pretty fucked." For nearly a week, Yang Xian didn't play at home. Yang Chengchuan was quite concerned about the affairs of Tang Xiaonian's mother and son, and quickly completed the transfer procedures for Tang Junhe, and even found a job for Tang Xiaonian in a public institution not far from home. Tang Xiaonian had no objection, accepted the new life Yang Chengchuan arranged for him, and within a few days went to work with his bag. Tang Junhe remembered that his mother Tang Xiaonian was not like this before. When he was very young, every time Yang Chengchuan handed over money, Tang Xiaonian would reach out to take it first, and then throw it in his face fiercely. Later, Yang Chengchuan learned to be smarter, and secretly hid the money under the floor mat at the door, and then called Tang Xiaonian to tell Tang Xiaonian that everything would be fine, but he didn't expect Tang Xiaonian to open the door when he came next time with a small slit. Only one hand was stretched out, and the wad of money was slammed into Yang Chengchuan's face. It seems that from a certain point, when Yang Chengchuan handed over the money again, Tang Xiaonian accepted it silently. After accepting his money, it is naturally not easy to scold him. After all, taking advantage of others, this saying also worked on Tang Xiaonian. It probably started from that Dongchuang incident. Tang Junhe sat at the dining table, eating, and thinking about the past with confidence. The other two people at the dinner table have obviously adapted to this unharmonious reorganized family, and they are discussing Tang Junhe's transfer. "It's all done. I'll send them to school on the first day of school." Although Yang Chengchuan, who is almost young, still looks decent, he can't hide the showy tone that is typical of middle-aged men in his speech. In a class, the teachers are all the top-notch teachers in the number 1 middle school. All the well-connected parents in the city will squeeze their children into this class. Didn't it mean that Xiaoxuan's grades were not good? Tang Xiaonian asked nonchalantly while eating the food, "How can I get into this class?" "Hey, that kid used to have good grades in junior high school, but later he missed the senior high school entrance examination because of his mother's affairs. No school can accept him without high school entrance examination scores. He happened to have won the ranking in the previous city sports meeting, so I entrusted someone to give it to him. I made up a quota for a special sports student, so I barely squeezed in." It turned out that Yang Xian was a sports student. When Tang Junhe heard them discussing Yang Xian's matter, he drew his attention back. His mother used to be a middle school teacher and had a good relationship with the head of the department. The head of the department knew Xiaoxuan's situation, so he assigned him a place for sports students in this class. It's just that this kid didn't live up to it. After entering high school, he refused. "I've learned it, and now I'm really a sports student." Yang Chengchuan became angry and his face became a little ugly as he spoke. Tang Xiaonian listened silently without expressing his opinion. Junhe is still promising, and his grades can still be so good after jumping the first level. Yang Chengchuan turned his face to Tang Junhe, his face was slightly pale, and said with a smile, "After you move here, you may still be able to influence your brother. In the future you two are in the same class, no matter in life or study, you take care of each other and make progress together." Ah! As Yang Chengchuan spoke, he spoke in an official accent, which made Tang Junhee feel an uncontrollable feeling of disgust. Tang Junhee didn't answer, took a spoonful of soup with a spoon, and drank it in small sips. I don't understand manners at all. I'm talking to you. Do you hear me? Tang Xiaonian tapped the rim of his bowl with his chopsticks. I heard. Tang Junhee said. Children in the rebellious period are like this. Yang Chengchuan was a little embarrassed by his ignorance, and laughed dryly, trying to make up for himself. After a moment of embarrassing silence, Tang Xiaonian asked again, Xiao Xian hasn't come back these days, where does he live? With one of his classmates, he's also a son of a bitch. He hangs around every day, and he's not in good shape. Tang Xiaonian lowered his eyes and said in a low voice, maybe it's because Junhee and I are here, he feels uncomfortable. Yang Chengchuan seemed not to want to talk about Yang Xian's affairs, so he said with a straight face, don't worry about him, he doesn't like to come back and no one will beg him. I mean. Tang Xiaonian paused, and finally said what had been circling in her mind for the past few days, if he feels uncomfortable, why don't he live in the school for a while after school starts? He wants to come back, so anytime. Before she finished speaking, Tang Junhee interrupted coldly, I also want to live on campus. Tang Xiaonian froze for a moment, then lowered his face, and deliberately suppressed his anger and asked, what school do you live in? Tang Junhee put the chopsticks on the table, looked at Tang Xiaonian's face and said, I feel uncomfortable. I didn't do anything for you since you were young? You live on campus. Tang Xiaonian became agitated immediately, do you have the ability to live on campus? Okay, I can't live anymore. Yang Chengchuan saw Tang Xiaonian's inner calculations, and also saw Tang Junhee's dislike for him, so he persuaded him indifferently, everything is here. Let's live at home, no matter how uncomfortable it is, it's still a home. I'm done. Tang Junhee stood up, got up and went back to the room. At the last second before turning around, he received Tang Xiaonian's stare of reproach, probably because he felt that he was a witty-eyed wolf, he thought. Tang Junhee sat back at the desk, and continued to do the mathematical Olympiad questions that he hadn't finished in the morning. For him, being a good student is not for the sake of getting ahead, honoring his ancestors, or even living a decent life in the future. There is only one purpose to leave here, go far away, and never come back. Tang Xiaonian's voice was faintly heard outside, he is sometimes ignorant, and he never needs me to worry about his studies. He still had the opportunity to represent the school in the city's Olympiad in junior high school, if it wasn't for. Hypocritical, Tang Junhee thought, how did Tang Xiaonian become like this? Or maybe Tang Xiaonian has been like this from the beginning. Even taking his name, you can see Tang Xiaonian's ambition to compete, and to skip a grade. When Tang Xiaonian relied on his relationship to make Tang Junhee skip a grade, what he thought was nothing more than Yang Chenchuan's eldest son, that's all. Speaking of it, Tang Junhee vaguely remembers that he seems to have heard the saying that Yang Xian had good grades before. It seems that Tang Xiaonian told him specifically in the year when he skipped a grade, the purpose was just to make him feel better just a little bit. But it's been a long time, and he didn't hear it in his heart at that time, and he can't remember clearly now. He is Tang Xiaonian's only source of conversation with others, and the days when the report card of each semester is sent out is when Tang Xiaonian is most elated. Tang Junhee knew all these things. He knew better than anyone else the vanity and hypocrisy of his mother Tang Xiaonian, but he was also the one who had the least position to accuse Tang Xiaonian. On the afternoon of the last day of the winter vacation, Feng Bo yelled and called a few classmates to come home and copy homework together. The gate guards in the community are strictly guarded, and you can't get in without swiping your card. Yang Xian and Feng Bo had lunch in the restaurant downstairs, and then stood by the side of the road waiting for those people to come. The appointed time was 1:30 p.m., and with 10 minutes to go, Ying Hui arrived first. Yo, I even put on some makeup to meet Brother Xian. Feng Bo joked as soon as he saw Ying Hui, "I'll take a photo of you and send it to the homeroom teacher's phone. Would you like me to take a picture of you when you copy my homework later?" Ying Hui countered without showing any weakness. Ying Hui stood next to Yang Xian when she arrived. She was not very tall, she only reached his chin. She is quite attractive, which can be seen from the passers-by who turn their heads frequently. Ying Hui stood beside Yang Xian, looking for something to chat with him, but couldn't think of a good topic for a while, so she could only ask dryly, "Have you eaten?" Yang Xian leaned against the telegraph pole and let out an embarrassing hum. "What are you eating?" Ying Hui continued her efforts and asked again. Yang Xian raised his arm, pointed backward with his thumb, and lazily said, "That one." Oh, Ying Hui was not discouraged, and asked this meaningless topic, "Is it delicious?" Yang Xian said succinctly, "It's okay." After speaking, he looked at the few people who came behind. "Are you almost here? Let's go." "It's all set, let's go." Feng Bo waved his arms, "Let's go, brothers." After speaking, he glanced at Ying Hui again, "And that, sisters." When Ying Hui stopped talking to Yang Xian, the coyness in her body disappeared. "Let's go, Sister Feng will lead the way." A group of people crossed their shoulders and walked to the entrance of the community. Feng Bo took out his trouser pockets, and then howled, "Damn!" He hurriedly took out his left and right trouser pockets, and turned to Yang Xian with a mournful face, "Brother Xian, did you bring the keys? Didn't you say you brought it when you went out?" Yang Xian looked at him speechlessly. "I was wrong." Feng Bo wanted to cry, "I'm sorry everyone." "You're not going to KFC again, are you?" Wang Xingchun's tone was clearly displeased. "Hey, Chen Hao," who was next to him, patted him on the back, "let's not talk about chicken, civilized you and me. The school bell is here, can you restrain yourself?" Wang Xingchun waved his hand away. "Then what should we do? Where are we going?" Ying Hui still stood beside Yang Xian, waiting for the opinions of the others. "My mother is at home." A paw was raised. "My grandpa came to my house." The other paw was raised again. Feng Bo thought for a while, then bumped Yang Xian with his shoulder. "Hey, brother Xian, why don't you go to your house?" Yang Xian glanced at him and said calmly, "You don't know what's going on in my house." "Go when you know it," Feng Bo said enthusiastically, "let's go together, Saner is so mad, and take a look at what Saner's son looks like, I heard he was transferred to our class. If there's anything to see, it's disturbing to watch, so don't go." "It's really strange, that's your house," Feng Bo added fuel to the fire, "why is it that you've been kicked out of this situation?" "What? What's wrong?" Ying Hui asked Feng Bo curiously. Brother Xian's father married Saner back, and Saner brought a small oil bottle, the two of them worked together. Feng Bo made a push gesture with both hands on his chest, "Just let brother Xian kicked out of the house. Don't talk nonsense." Yang Xian warned him with his eyes. Feng Bo fell silent and shrugged his shoulders at Ying Hui. "Come on, let's make room for brother Xian." Chen Hao waved his arms, "Being kind to the bad guys is being cruel to yourself. Let's go, I've been to Yang Xian's house, I know where it is." Several people were clamoring to go, but Yang Xian didn't say anything, and let them go. The temperature dropped suddenly a few days ago, it just snowed, and it cleared up again these days. The unmelted snow piled up on the side of the road, looking dirty and disgusting. Several people went upstairs, walked to the door of Yang Xian's house, and stepped aside automatically, waiting for Yang Xian to come to open the door. Yang Xian stepped forward, took out the key, bent slightly, lowered his head and opened the lock. As soon as the door was opened, the heat in the room rushed in. Several people were silent in a tacit understanding. There was no one in the living room, it was quiet, except for Yang Xian's room. There was another room with the door locked. Feng Bo and Chen Hao looked around the other rooms, then turned their heads and said to Yang Xian in a low voice, "There seems to be no one in these rooms." Yang Xian had already sat on the sofa, and said in a normal voice, "I don't know, the cup is on the table, whoever wants to drink water pours it himself." "Hey, who is this room?" Feng Bo pointed to the closed door. Yang Xian took a sip of water and put the cup back on the table. "Who else?" "Oh, I see," Feng Bo pretended to be suddenly enlightened. "Little oil bottle. Copy your homework," Yang Xian said. It was cold outside, and several of them were overdressed. As soon as they entered the house, their hats and coats were thrown all over the floor. "This is mathematics, physics, and chemistry. I borrowed it from Shweswiba." Feng Bo put a stack of test papers on the table. "English is up to you, Ying Hui." "I know, I brought it." Ying Hui picked up the school bag that was put aside, unzipped it, lowered her head and took out her test paper from it. "Don't copy the same thing, the teacher will ask you again later." "Sister," Chen Hao turned his head and smiled at her, "we veteran criminals like us, do you still need to tell me?" Several people began to copy their homework noisily. Yang Xian took the remote control from the coffee table and turned on the TV. "Yang Xian, don't you copy." The floor heating was fully turned on. Ying Hui sat on the ground not far from Yang Xian and asked him. "Well, no copying." Yang Xian looked at the screen and pressed the remote control to change channels. "The teacher wants to investigate," Ying Hui said again. CCTV 6 was broadcasting a Chinese journey to the west. Yang Xian stopped to change the channel, put the remote control aside, and said again. "Copying homework is not cool, Brother Xian never copy homework." Feng Bo buried his head in writing, while not forgetting to tear down his desk. "I'll help you write it." Ying Hui volunteered, took Yang Xian's test paper, and began to fill in the answers to her own test paper. Tang Junhe was already woken up by the sound outside. When the people outside came in, he was taking a nap in the room with the door closed. He probably woke up from the little oil bottle. Feng Bo was standing at his door and he heard it clearly. Tang Junhe pulled over the quilt irritably, stuffed his head in, and lay down for a while with his eyes closed. The group of noisy people outside will be his classmates from tomorrow? It seems that going to school will not be a pleasant experience, Tang Junhe sighed. After waking up, he still wanted to go to the bathroom, but he didn't want to go out and face the people in the living room. It seems that they will not be able to leave for a while. Tang Junhe tossed and turned irritably, lifted the quilt and sat up, took a deep breath, got out of bed, put on slippers, and walked to the door. Then walked back again. "Let's change out of our pajamas," Tang Junhe thought. He was wearing the little panda pajamas that Tang Xiaonian bought for him, and he had a fluffy panda head on his chest, and he looked too imposing. It is not conducive to the following eye contact and eye contact. Tang Junhe thought so, grabbed the collar, and pulled the pajamas off his head. Topless, he went to the closet to find a brown sweater, put it on, and walked to the door. He took a deep breath, and pulled the door open. The noise in the living room stopped for an instant, and all the people looked back at him with curiosity in their eyes. Except for the person sitting on the side sofa, Yang Xian. Yang Xian was the last one to look at him. When he turned his head slowly, his eyes still stayed on the TV screen for a while, as if he couldn't part it. Tang Junhe heard that a Chinese journey to the west was playing on TV, because when the noise was still, Fairy Zixia was saying the classic line, "I like you so much, you will die if you like me." He and Yang Xian looked at each other for 2 seconds, maybe longer, no one can say for sure. Then Yang Xian turned his gaze back to the screen. After all, that paragraph is really classic, and Fairy Zixia is much prettier than his little oil bottle. Tang Junhe thought so, and looked away. He bent down and threw away a piece of clothing under his feet, then walked to the bathroom without paying attention, and closed the door. As soon as the door was closed, several people in the living room except Yang Xian looked at each other in blank dismay. The first one to react was Chen Hao. He blew a loud whistle and said loudly, "It's a pity, Yang Xian, why is it not a younger sister?" Yang Xian casually replied, "Your sister, what are you doing?" It was originally a serious question, but Chen Hoquan scrupulously misinterpreted it into something else. He said, "Do it." The other boys reacted and laughed maliciously. Ying Hui sat on the ground, and when she heard this, she rolled up the test paper and got up and beat him. "Why are you full of pornographic thoughts?" Feng Bo laughed the loudest. "You put it too tactfully, the yellow thing in his head is not thinking, but..." Before he finished speaking, he also received a response and shut up knowingly. Ying Hui straightened up, approached him and hit him on the head with the test paper. "Aren't you disgusting?" Feng Bo protected his head with his two arms, and begged for mercy in defeat. "Sister, Ying Daxiao, Sister Ying, stop beating me, I was wrong, really wrong." Ying Hui then sat back, copied two questions, raised her head to Yang Xian, hesitant to speak. Yang Xian was a little annoyed by the look, and frowned. "What do you want to say?" Only then did Ying Hui look at him, and said cautiously, "Your brother is really good looking, to be honest, he looks a bit like you." "Sister," Feng Bo touched him with his arm, "can you please don't touch the bad luck of the person you're in love with?" "It's just telling the truth." Ying Hui curled her lips. "What's the matter? If you like it, you can't tell the truth. If you look so good looking, I'll praise you in different ways every day." "Smoke." Yang Xian raised his chin towards Feng Bo. "I didn't bring any, do you have any?" "Oh, yes, go on." Feng Bo threw the cigarette case towards him. As soon as Yang Xian raised his hand to catch it, he took out a cigarette from the case, took out a lighter and lit it. His eyes were lowered, and he said vaguely, "He's not like me, he's like his mother." The sound insulation of the toilet is not good, and the sound from outside can't be heard clearly. Tang Junhe was standing in front of the sink washing his hands. Warm water ran over his fingers, and he looked up at himself in the mirror. Yang Xian is right, compared to Yang Chengchuan, he does look more like Tang Xiaonian. Obviously there was nothing wrong with the words themselves, but he didn't know why an unprecedented irritability suddenly appeared in his chest. This emotion rushed up his throat, and he couldn't help but want to yell "shut up" at the people in the living room. He tried his best to suppress himself, so he could not put this idea into practice. He turned the faucet to the cold water side, splashed a few splashes of water on his face, washed his face, wiped it clean with a towel, and then opened the bathroom door. There was a smell of smoke. In his previous home, it was impossible to have such a pungent smell. Tang Junhe confirmed again that he doesn't like it here. The uproar died down again. There were still people looking at him, but this time the eyes were no longer curious, but looked contemptuous, joking, or something. In short, they had malicious intentions. Tang Junhe walked back expressionlessly, opened the window of the bathroom to the maximum, walked to the kitchen beside him, did the same action, opened the window, and the edge of the aluminum alloy window rubbed jerkily, making a hula screeching sound. Everyone in the living room stopped what they were doing and stared at him dumbfounded. Tang Junhe didn't look at them, he walked to several other rooms, opened all the windows to the maximum, then returned to his room, closed the door, and locked it. It was the end of February, and the weather had not yet warmed up. The cold wind outside blew in through the wide open windows, making a whole room of astonished people shiver at the same time. Immediately, there were scolding voices one after another in the living room. "I'm go crazy. Damn, what's going on, Dad is freezing to death. My day is cold. Is your brother a lunatic, Yang Xian?" Yang Xian didn't speak, he just looked at the closed door, then stood up, walked to the window closest to him, and stopped. Everyone else thought he was going to close the window and turned their heads to look at him eagerly. But after a while, he realized that he was just standing in front of the wide open window smoking a cigarette, and had no intention of closing the window. I'm freezing to death, I'll close it. Feng Bo stood up cursingly, and closed the windows of several other rooms. After taking a few puffs, Yang Xian put out the cigarette, closed the window, and sat back. Brother Xian, I think I know why you moved out. Feng Bo pointed to Tang Junhe's room, and said angrily, this is called kicking your nose. Isn't it? After he finished speaking, he also looked at other people. Several people, trying to find recognition. That's right, we didn't do anything. Chen Hao put on an innocent expression, and spread his hands. He picked things up first. Seeing that Yang Xian didn't respond, Feng Bo took the initiative to go up to him and provoke him. Hey, brother Xian, when did you become so swallowed up? Don't you plan to give him some flair? Yang Xian glanced at him. What are you going to do? What can I do? Feng Bo talked a lot, shrunk his neck, and said bluffingly, I will never kill him. You are so sissy. Don't mix it up, Yang Xian said, I know my own. You say that, so we can rest assured. Feng Bo looked at him with a playful smile. Hey, remember to ask us to watch the battle and cheer for you. We'll talk about it when the time comes. It's you. Yang Xian looked at Feng Bo with a cold face, and then looked at several others, and you guys, my family's bad debt is not allowed to spread after school starts. Hey, that's for sure. Several other people nodded. Don't say it, don't say it. First day of school. Yang Xian, I'll go to the garage to pick up the car first. You and Junhe pack up and come down quickly. Yang Chengchuan put on his leather shoes, adjusted his tie in front of the mirror at the door, and turned his head to Yang Xian. Yang Xian didn't respond. He turned around and added, be quicker, and then opened the door and went downstairs. Tang Junhe went to the door to change his shoes, picked up his school bag and was about to go out. Tang Xiaonian walked over quickly, took his arm and took him in. I bought you face cream and didn't apply it, the weather is dry in spring, don't know. She said so, holding the face cream in her hand, opened the lid, scooped out a small piece of face cream with her index finger, and applied it to Tang Junhe without any explanation. Tang Junhe frowned, tilted his neck back, and obviously wanted to avoid it, but Tang Xiaonian pulled his arm again, so he could only let her greet his face with the sticky cream. Enough, he resisted, so much. You think I'm willing to serve you, Tang Xiaonian said, you're so old, you can wipe it off yourself in the future. Tang Xiaonian was applying cream to his face. Yang Xian came out of his room with his school bag on his back. Seeing this scene, he twitched one corner of his mouth, and let out a slight hum, like a laugh. Tang Junhe was sensitive to the sarcasm in this laugh. He broke away from Tang Xiaonian annoyedly, and took the cream in her hand. Don't put it on, I'm going to be late. Be warm to the students in the class. Tang Xiaonian urged, and then took the box of face cream back from Tang Junhe's hand. What are you doing with this to school? I put it in your room. Understood. Tang Junhe said. Yang Xian slowly changed his shoes behind him. Tang Junhe didn't know whether he should wait for him to go downstairs together. He unzipped his school bag, pretending to check if he had forgotten anything, and quietly observed Yang Xian's movements from the corner of his eye. Yang Xian didn't seem to wait for him. After changing his shoes, he opened the door and went out. His school bag was on the side, and their arms collided slightly as they passed by. Mom, I'm leaving. After Yang Xian went out, Tang Junhe yelled to the back room, then pushed the door and walked out. Yang Xian just closed the door, but didn't close it completely. The elevator was still 6 floors down, and there was no one at the door, and there was a sound of footsteps in the corridor. It seemed that Yang Xian didn't wait for the elevator, and went directly down the stairs. It was too slow. Tang Junhe glanced at the number displayed by the elevator door, and turned towards the stairs beside him. At 7 o'clock in the morning, before the sky was fully lit, the voice-activated lights in the corridor were lit by the sound of Yang Xian's footsteps, and were dimly illuminating the stairs. Boom 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 boom. The sound of footsteps one after another soon sounded in the corridor. Tang Junhee went downstairs and saw that Yang Xian did not go to the garage, but was standing next to a bicycle near the corridor, bending over to unlock it. "Hey!" Tang Junhee yelled at him. Yang Xian looked up at him, as if waiting for what he was going to say next. "Your dad said," Tang Junhee looked at him expressionlessly, "he sent us to school this morning." "I'll go by bike," Yang Xian said, unlocked the bike, then drove the bike out without looking at him, stepped over the seat with one leg, and rode away quickly. Tang Junhee exhaled, then walked towards the garage. Yang Chengchuan was standing by the car waiting for the two of them. Seeing Tang Junhee approaching, he asked, "Where's Yang Xian?" "Still dawdling." He rode away. Tang Junhee walked to the side of the car, opened the door and sat in the back row. If it's not that he doesn't know where the school is, he doesn't want to get in this car. However, it doesn't matter. It's getting worse and worse. Yang Chengchuan also got into the car and said while fastening his seat belt, "Don't mind, Junhee, it's nothing." Tang Junhee interrupted Yang Chengchuan. He didn't want to hear it at all. As Yang Chengchuan said, Runchanj No. 1 Middle School is the key point of the city, and the third class of science is the place where Crouching Tiger Hidden Dragon is the place. In this class of top students who are competing for hegemony, a small group of scumbags headed by Yang Xian and Feng Bo have become out of place and particularly eye-catching. I understand the situation, so don't worry. Chu Li, the third-class teacher, took Tang Junhee from Yang Chengchuan and patted him on the shoulder. "Tell me what doesn't suit you. I've seen you. I don't need to say more about my previous grades in school. Good students." It's Yang Xian. She changed the subject and looked at Yang Chengchuan. "I really can't do anything with this kid. That kid doesn't eat oil and salt. Please worry about it." Yang Chengchuan sighed with a headache. "Let's work both aspects, and I will talk to him when I find time." "Okay, I'll talk to him today too." The class teacher raised his wrist and looked at his watch. "Class is about to start. I'll take Jun Hyuk to the class first. A group of children are still wild when they come back from vacation. The class doesn't know what kind of mess is it going to be. You go and you go, you should take good care of it." Yang Chengchuan said a few words to the teacher in charge, then turned and left. "Teacher Chu." Tang Junhee opened his mouth when he was approaching the door of the class. "What's wrong?" Chu Li turned to look at him. "Can I not introduce myself later?" Chu Li has been teaching for nearly 20 years. This is the first time she heard such a request. She laughed a little and said, "What's the matter? Why don't you do it? You have to let everyone know you." "There's nothing to introduce," Tang Junhee said further bluntly. "I hate introducing myself." This is no longer a request. Chu Li was stunned for a moment, and then thought with some headaches, the youngest son of Deputy Mayor Yang, seems to be no better than the eldest son Yang Xian. "Okay," Chu Li had nothing to say, and gave way. "Then let me briefly introduce you to everyone." "Thank you, teacher," Tang Junhee said politely. Passing by in the corridor, several classrooms exploded, and Class 3 of Science in the second year of high school was no exception because of its grades. When Chu Li opened the door with Tang Junhee in, the students in the class were gathering together in small groups to make jokes. Seeing the head teacher coming in, everyone automatically fell silent and returned to their seats. Only Feng Bo, the idiot, turned his back to the door, and said loudly, "I was so tired from copying yesterday afternoon that I was about to suffer from frozen shoulder." "Hey, don't go, you guys. The teacher is here," someone reminded him in a low voice. Feng Bo shut up abruptly, turned his head and made eye contact with Chu Li, and then sat back on his seat in despair. "Should I grant you a week of sick leave so that you can take good care of your frozen shoulder when you go back?" The homeroom teacher glared at Feng Bo, then adjusted his glasses, and looked around the class. "The third year of high school is half a semester away. Look at you, do you look like a sophomore in high school? Just now I walked all the way from the corridor, and the other classes were memorizing, only our third class of science, the voice is the same high, but the content of the homework is copied. You guys are really good at making newcomers watch jokes as soon as they arrive. Talking nonsense, Tang Junhee stood behind the head teacher, looked at the disheveled students in the whole class and thought, obviously other classes were more noisy. Let me introduce it to everyone. Chu Li was half a head shorter than Tang Junhee. She put her hand on Tang Junhee's back and led him a few steps towards the middle of the classroom. This semester, we have a new class. Classmate, call. She looked back at Tang Junhee. She wanted to have a friendly interaction with this new classmate, but Tang Junhee didn't intend to talk to her at all, so she just left her alone. The students in the class also looked up at him curiously and kept whispering. It's Tang Junhee. The head teacher had no choice but to pick up the words, the grades are very good, especially in mathematics. The new student is not very familiar with the class, and the class cadre usually helps him to integrate into the environment. There is a vacancy there, you go first go. The head teacher pointed to an empty seat in the penultimate row, and patted Tang Junhee's back. Tang Junhee went straight to the empty seat, put his school bag on the table, and sat down. Sitting at the same table as him was a girl with a crooked ponytail, who was making a happy expression at the classmate beside her. Seeing Tang Junhee sitting next to her, she turned her head and spoke to him in a low voice, "Your name is Tang Junhee, right? How do you write it? Which gentleman is which?" Tang Junhee stuffed his school bag into the hole of the table and said, "The gentleman of a gentleman, the illustrious he." While speaking, he absently turned his head and looked back, and saw the last empty seat in the middle row that it should be Yang Xian, he thought. Yang Chengchuan said that Yang Xian was also in this class, but he just glanced at the class, but didn't see him. "Oh, it's very nice. My name is Yin Kong, and I'm gurgling," the girl at the same table said. She seemed to have something to say, but then she was called by the teacher in charge. "Yin Kong, I told you last semester that you can't tie your braids. My words will expire after the winter vacation, right?" "Understood, teacher." Yin Kong quickly lowered his head, grabbed his ponytail with both hands, and moved it symbolically to the middle. "Okay, hurry up and recite the book, the teacher in charge will be here in a while." The head teacher glanced at the class again, and then walked towards the door. As soon as he walked out of the classroom, Yang Xian came in from the door. "What are you doing again?" The head teacher grabbed his arm and stopped him at the door, asking sharply. "The school team is having a meeting, teacher." Yang Xian looked at her innocently. "You really think of yourself as a sports student, don't you?" The homeroom teacher looked at him bitterly. "Come find me in my office after the second get out of class." "Oh." Yang Xian looked down at her. The math teacher hurried over at this moment, nodded to the head teacher, and walked into the classroom. "Let's go to class first." The class teacher was about to walk over, but then remembered something, and turned around and said, "By the way, tell Tang Junhee for me to come to my office to get the exercise book after the second get out of class." "I won't tell." Yang Xian refused. "Of course, my father told you about my family's situation." The homeroom teacher got dizzy for a while. "It's okay, you call the class leader out, you guys really made me suffer from high blood pressure, one class is not as good as one class. Have you handed in your homework for the winter vacation?" The math teacher was in his early 30s, with a head of black shiny hair sticking straight to his scalp. It looked like he had an ion perm on the second day of February before school started. She walked up to the podium, tapped the blackboard twice with an eraser. "I want you to correct the questions in the workbook after you finish it, and copy the answers without fooling me, right?" "No," the whole class answered in a drawn-out voice. "Very good," the math teacher nodded in satisfaction, and then held up a stack of test papers and shook them. "I took some questions from the workbook and produced a test paper, do it in this class, and see what you just said. Is it true or not?" As soon as these words were said, it immediately caused a commotion in the podium, and the elongated faces of many people were clearly written with the words "to be finished." The test papers were passed from front to back, mixed in with the low-pitched conversation, making a crackling sound. Tang Junhee got the test paper and heard the math teacher say "come in front of the podium." He took out his pen and started to work on the questions. Out of the corner of his eye, he caught sight of Yang Xian walking in. "How long does it take to ride a bike to school?" This idea flashed through his mind, and then he quickly came back to focus on the test paper. They are all basic question types. Except for the last big question, there is nothing to do. Tang Junhee finished it quickly, then put the test papers together and put them on the corner of the table, and couldn't help but tilt his head back. There are 2 rows of tables and an aisle between him and Yang Xian. You can catch a glimpse of Yang Xian's movements just by turning your head slightly. Yang Xian was sleeping on the table. It's really a standard scumbag configuration, Tang Junhee thought, then retracted his gaze, took out the Mathematical Olympiad exercise book and began to look through it. The girl at the same table turned to look at him, and asked in a low voice in surprise, "It's done? So fast?" Tang Junhee's eyes fell on the exercise book, and he felt hatred lightly. "Well, it's very simple." The girl was stimulated and looked at him like a monster for a few seconds, then turned her head and continued to work on the question without a word. The math teacher wandered up to him, picked up his test paper and looked at it for a while. Before taking it away, he asked, "Used to be from number 3 middle school?" "Yeah." Tang Junhee nodded. Number 3 middle school is a public high school located in the outskirts of Runcheng city. The teaching staff and teaching equipment are barely up to the passing line. In Runcheng, only the common people who can't afford expensive school district housing and can't get along with them will be willingly step into that poor school. When Tang Junhee was still in junior high school, Yang Chengchuan and Tang Xiaonian promised that Tang Junhee would definitely be admitted to Runcheng number 1 middle school in the future. It's just that on the eve of the summer vacation of the high school entrance examination, Yang Xian's mother's life came to an abrupt end, and Yang Chengchuan was facing the pressure of the deputy mayor's re-election, so naturally he didn't dare to address the rumors about his private life. During that time, Yang Chengchuan was busy establishing his image of being honest and upright, and even the frequency of going to Tang Xiaonian's side was greatly reduced. Thinking about stuffing the eldest son who didn't get high school entrance examination results into the city center is already frightening, and naturally he has no time to take care of the younger son who has never called him dad. Tang Junhee was lowering his head to do a question, when suddenly a hand was stretched out from the front desk, and a small note was handed over. He turned his head and lowered his voice and said, "Help pass it to Yang Xian." The small pink note was folded squarely. In this case, it should be the answer to the test paper. Tang Junhee looked up and saw a girl in the 2 positions in front of him cautiously looking back towards Yang Xian's direction. Judging from the tense lines on her neck, she seemed a little nervous. If I remember correctly, it should be the girl sitting on the floor of the living room yesterday, very close to Yang Xian. Tang Junhee lowered his head and continued to work on the questions, ignoring the request from the front desk. The hand was left to dry for a moment, and then retracted. With a slightly complaining tisk, the front desk changed the direction of passing, and handed the note to the student on the other side of the aisle. Then it was unimpeded to Yang Xian's hands. Tang Junhee caught a glimpse of Yang Xian being called up, and he straightened his upper body from the desk, as if he had taken the note. City focus. Top-level faculty configuration. If you squeeze your head, you will come in. It really deserves its reputation, Tang Junhee mocked in his heart, and then ticked the answer on a question. When the second class in the morning was over, the get-out-of-class leader hurried over and asked him to go to the head teacher's office to get the exercise book. Tang Junhee responded, asked where the office was, and walked out of the classroom. There were so many people between classes, the students waiting in front of the elevator blocked the corridor. About to miss the next elevator, Tang Junhee lowered his head and walked through the crowded crowd, and then turned to the stairs on one side. The classroom for class is on the 3rd floor, and the teacher's office is on the 8th floor. He climbed 5 floors and was slightly out of breath. Turn left after getting out of the elevator. Where is the elevator entrance? Tang Junhee has not been very sensitive to the direction since he was a child. Whenever he came to a new environment, he had to adapt for a while before he could distinguish the direction. He stood on the stairs on the 8th floor, recalling the route the squad leader told him, when a voice came from behind him, "Go left." The voice was so close that Tang Junhee was slightly taken aback. His heart stopped beating at that moment. He immediately realized that he was blocking the way, and he staggered to make way for the person behind him, while turning his head casually said, "Thanks." It turned out to be Yang Xian. After a moment of hesitation, half of the word "thank you" got stuck in his throat. Yang Xian didn't say anything, just took advantage of the gap he made, and walked in front of him. "Really look down and see you up." Tang Junhee stood where he was, looking at Yang Xian's back and thinking. Go to the left. It seems that he knows where he is going, so he should also go upstairs to find the head teacher. Tang Junhee speculated in this way, raised his heels and walked behind Yang Xian, keeping a distance of a few steps away from him. At 10 o'clock in the morning, the bright sunlight projected on the floor through the window, and also on Yang Xian's slightly shaking back. As he walked forward, the window edge kept casting thin slanted shadows on his body. Shadow. The boy in front who walks a bit wobbly is my brother. Biological brother. This kind of thought inexplicably flashed through Tang Junhee's mind, so that he was in a trance for a moment. He was suddenly curious, if he called brother to that figure at this time, how would the owner of the figure react? Will it stop? Then, will you turn around? Or keep going? Or pretend not to hear at all, and won't stop? I really want to try it. Tang Junhee looked at the back and stopped his thoughts in time. Walking to the door of an office, Yang Xian pushed the door open and disappeared from his sight. Only then did Tang Junhee lower his eyes, walked forward a few steps, stopped at the door of that door, looked up at the sign on the door, and pushed the door in with his hand. As soon as he entered the door, he saw Yang Xian standing by the diagonally opposite table, with his back to the door. The head teacher who was blocked heard the sound of pushing the door, and then looked at him with his head, "Come here." Well, Tang Junhee walked in that direction, and he stopped when he was a few steps away from Yang Xian. "Teacher Chu, I'm here to get the exercise book. It's all on the cabinet over there." The head teacher extended his arm and pointed forward. "Look at the ones you didn't have at school before, take a copy." Tang Junhee walked to the front of the row of low cabinets, bowed his head and began to look for books. He heard the teacher in charge say from behind, "The math teacher came to report to me after class. This time I handed in a blank paper again? What's going on?" Yang Xian's voice sounded a little foolish. "I can't do it." "You don't know any questions?" "Well, not a single question." "Didn't someone send him the answer?" Tang Junhee took a step aside with a few books in his arms. "Didn't he copy them? Or is that not actually the answer? No one will send a love letter during the exam. What do you want me to say about you?" "I've said what I should say 800 times, said the head teacher as if he was in a hurry. "Every teacher in the class agrees with this point. Why do you say you refuse to learn?" "Yang Xian, you put your brain on my head, and I will learn it for you, okay? Isn't talent just for wasting?" Tang Junhee heard Yang Xian say this not far behind him. "What fallacies!" The head teacher slapped the table, hating iron for being weak. "You just say that your dad is so busy every day, and he has to come to school several times in person. Isn't it just to let you correct your study attitude? You don't have to be too serious. Correct, you just learn a little bit." All the exercise books were stacked up to half a meter. Tang Junhee moved them to the ground first, then bent down to pick them up, put his chin on the top book, and walked out of the office silently. Yang Xian is so happy. Tang Junhee thought so when he walked out of the office. Some classmates handed him answers, some teachers advised him to study hard, and a deputy mayor's father worried about him. He seemed to have everything. Unlike himself, only Tang Xiaonian. Hey? Where's Tang Junhee? The homeroom teacher, who was parched from the lesson, stopped to take a sip of water, and looked forward. Why did he just leave without saying a word? There are so many books, and I still want someone to help him move them. Forget it, let's talk about you. The head teacher looked away. You said that every time your father came to see me in person. According to the practice of Runchange No. 1 Middle School, the last class of the day is a self-study class. The sports students of the school team go to the playground to train, while others stay in the classroom to sort out what they have learned that day. However, the first day of school was an exception. The teachers were all called to a meeting. The classrooms were unattended, and the corridors were not patrolled. Before school ended, many people had already packed their school bags and eagerly awaited the bell for the end of get out of class. Ring! Everyone, don't rush to leave later, the math teacher is coming to distribute the morning test papers. The math class representative stood up before the get out of class bell and announced. Hey, what are you talking about? The whole class immediately sighed after saying this. As soon as the get out of class bell rang, the small discussion immediately turned into a loud noise. Tang Junhee ignored the commotion around him and continued to do the Olympiad questions. He felt that the answer to the last multiple-choice question was wrong, and he was checking the calculation on the draft paper. Yin Kong, who was at the same table, came over to talk to him, and saw that he cherished words like gold, so he wisely went to the front row to look for Ying Hui. It was only the last step, and there was a pop sound, and a basketball was suddenly thrown from the front right, and it hit Yin Kong's cup on the table impartially. The uncovered cup fell in response, and the water in it spilled all over the table, and also splashed on Tang Junhee's face, school uniform, and the open exercise booklet. Hey, good shot! Chen Hao applauded immediately. Bet with me. Feng Bo sat on the desk and looked at him with a sure smile. Bring the agreed 100 yuan here. Tang Junhee wiped the water off his face with his hand, and looked up at him. Feng Bo held up the 100 yuan that Chen Hao took in his hand, turned his head and said to Tang Junhee, I'm sorry, buddy, I didn't expect to throw it so accurately, why don't you split 50? This sentence was undoubtedly a naked provocation, but Tang Junhee seemed to ignore him, stood up, walked to the back of the classroom and picked up the basketball. Hey, don't be impulsive, it's not good to hit someone. Feng Bo thought he was going to throw the ball over, and raised an arm to cover his face. The whole class immediately fell silent, looking back at Tang Junhee. Tang Junhee just returned to his seat with the basketball, shook out the water from the exercise book, put it in his school bag, carried the school bag on his left shoulder, and walked out of the classroom with the ball. Fuck, give me back the ball! Feng Bo yelled at him, jumped off the table and chased him out of the classroom. As soon as he ran out, he saw Tang Junhee opened the window in the corridor, threw the basketball in his hand out of the window, and threw it to the back hill of the deserted school, and then walked towards the stairs with his school bag on his back. Fuck! That's Yang Xian's basketball, you fucking! Feng Bo caught up, grabbed Tang Junhee's collar from behind, clenched his fist and swung it towards his face. Tang Junhee turned his head to dodge, barely dodging, leaving Feng Bo in vain. You go down and pick it up for me. Feng Bo withdrew his hand in some embarrassment, grabbed his neckline with the other hand, and pointed viciously out of the window. Tang Junhee looked at him calmly and asked, why did I pick it up? Whoever that throws it down will pick it up. Feng Bo became angry with embarrassment. He is the only son in his family, he was pampered and grown up, and no one dared to show him face in public. Whoever wants the ball will pick it up. Tang Junhee said. I'm fuck. Before Feng Bo could say anything, he heard Yang Xian's voice coming from behind. What's wrong? After Yang Xian finished training on the playground, as soon as he went upstairs, he ran into the scene of hand-to-hand combat, walked over and asked, "What's wrong?" Seeing Yang Xian approaching, Feng Bo let go of Tang Junhe's neckline, and before letting go, he shoved him in the chest. "Brother Xian, he threw your basketball out of the window." Pushed by him, Tang Junhe staggered 2 steps back, then stopped, looking at Yang Xian. "What basketball?" Yang Xian asked. Chen Hao leaned against the door frame of the classroom with folded arms, watched the excitement and said without hesitation, "It's your basketball signed by an NBA All-Star." Yang Xian turned his head and glanced at Chen Hao, walked up to Tang Junhe, blocked the sunlight reflected on his face, looked into his eyes and asked, "Did you throw it?" Tang Junhe raised his head slightly, looked at Yang Xian who was half a head taller than him in front of him, and tried his best to look calm. "Yes." Many people ran to the back door and stretched out their necks to watch the commotion. People passing by in the corridor also stopped, stopping to watch the sudden dispute. A small spark falling from the ivory tower is enough to ignite a large area of dull curiosity. Yang Xian thought it was a little funny. He noticed Tang Junhe's clenched fist hanging by his trousers, and easily saw through his nervousness and pretending to be calm. The doll who used to cry only when things went wrong, now stares at her like a cat with its back arched and ready to fight. It made him want to try what it would be like to annoy him. Would he cry like he did when he was a child? "Pick it up," he said coldly. "Don't you even ask what's going on." Tang Junhe looked at him, swallowed his throat, and his Adam's apple slid up and down. The right half of his clothes was wet a lot, presumably it was Feng Bo and Chen Hao's mess. "Is it necessary?" Yang Xian smiled, "You threw it away, then you pick it up." "What if I say not to pick it up?" Yang Xian seemed to see that the cat's back arched higher, like a fully drawn bow. A prank idea suddenly popped up in his mind, then he lowered his head slightly, leaned into Tang Junhe's ear, and said in a low voice, "Since your mother treats you like a little princess, I probably don't mind buying you one." "Exactly the same basketball, right?" Tang Junhe's mind flashed the slightly mocking smile that Yang Xian showed to him in the morning. His face was burning red, and his clenched fists immediately waved out towards Yang Xian's face. Yang Xian tilted his head to hide, and stretched out his hand to catch the punch. His hand was wrapped around the clenched fist, and he used some strength to press down. "Want to do it? Save your energy. What are you doing?" Gathering crowds to fight in the corridor. The math teacher rushed over in high heels, pushed aside a group of students who were watching the excitement, and instantly dispersed the dozens of students blocking the corridor with a shocking voice, "I don't even look at how I am doing in the exam, and I still have the face to go out to watch the excitement. Hey, you two, how about exorcising evil spirits there? Go back to the classroom." Taking advantage of the situation, Tang Junhe shook Yang Xian's hand away forcefully, glared at him, then turned his head and walked towards the stairs. "Hey, isn't that from our class?" The math teacher had never seen such a student who didn't show his face, and was a little dazed for a while, grabbing a person next to him and asking. "It's just transferred today." The man stammered. "Call him back." "Hey, wait, forget it and stop calling." The math teacher waved his hand. "Go back to the classroom, he doesn't need to make corrections. Everyone else, go back to my seat and sit down." Everyone dispersed. Yang Xian stared at the stairs for another 2 seconds, then turned and went back to the classroom. "That's what you said. You didn't lie to me, right?" The math teacher slapped a stack of test papers on the podium twice, sending dust flying all over the place. "Yes, oh no, there is one, a new student from another school who doesn't have to do winter homework. The class representative is here to help distribute the papers." The math teacher handed the test paper to the class representative, slapped the eraser on the podium loudly, and roared earnestly, "You still think you are a top student in a key high school, don't you? Look at the students who just passed the exam today. A new classmate transferred from number 3 middle school. Complete a test paper in half an hour, full marks. Don't you have a sense of urgency? Wake up, my classmates, don't be a frog in a well." "Okay, go back tonight and order the test paper. It's just right, tell me about it in class tomorrow, do you understand me? Understood, the whole class replied lazily. As soon as the math teacher came out of the classroom, Feng Bo turned around immediately, slapped the desks in the back row with both hands, and shouted at Yang Xian, how about brother Xian, do you want to relieve your anger? Yang Xian got up and walked out the door, the basketball signed by the NBA All-Star, you guys can really talk nonsense. Feng Bo walked out behind him with his school bag on his back, and said with a big laugh, it looks like he really believed it, and I almost couldn't hold back my joy. How did you recruit him? Yang Xian glanced at him. Feng Bo recounted what happened in the classroom before, and then eagerly asked, hey, let him pick up the basketball tomorrow. What you pick, you pick. Yang Xian didn't dump him at all. Brother He Xian, I'm helping you vent your anger. Feng Bo wailed. It's almost done, it's just targeting him, it's not interesting. Yang Xian lost interest, and walked in another direction, I'm going to the cafeteria to eat. Go to the cafeteria. Feng Bo grabbed his arm, what's the matter, won't you go home? Well, I applied for accommodation with the head teacher. You're not serious, are you? Feng Bo's eyes widened in shock, that's your home. I don't want to cause trouble for myself. Yang Xian looked at the playground not far away, frowned and said, okay, leave my affairs alone. Tang Junhe left the teaching building, bowed his head and walked out of the school quickly. What happened just now made him confirm a vague idea that Yang Xian hated himself. Originally, he still had a little bit of hope. After all, sometime 10 years ago, they were really as close as brothers. Now it seems that I am still too naive. At that time, Yang Xian didn't know his identity. In those days, it was not so much that Yang Xian was kept in the dark and willingly extended good intentions to himself, but it was better to say that he concealed his identity and stole those good intentions with ulterior motives. After all, at that time, although Yang Xian knew nothing about his identity, he vaguely knew that Yang Chengchuan was his biological father, and Yang Xian was his biological brother. No one had ever told him the truth, so he resignedly pretended not to know. When he walked out of the school gate, he was sensitively aware of a gaze cast on him. Surrounded by parents who came to pick up their children, bustling around the school gate, Tang Junhe looked in the direction of the line of sight just now, but did not see any suspicious figure he should be hiding. He subconsciously clenched the strap of his school bag, and looked back cautiously as he walked through the crowd. As he was walking forward, someone suddenly reached out and grabbed his arm, which startled him. His heart jumped up and he almost cried out. He looked up reflexively. It turned out to be Yang Chenchuan's driver. Yes, he breathed a sigh of relief, Uncle Chen. What are you thinking? The driver laughed, amused by his frightened look, then looked towards the school gate. Where's your brother? He hasn't come out yet. That gaze came again. Tang Junhe looked back suddenly. The man had no time to hide, half of his body was exposed in his sight, and then quickly disappeared into the crowd. What's wrong? The driver asked, noticing what he was looking at. It's okay, Tang Junhe turned his head, and then he said to the last question, he went home by bike. Although Yang Xian didn't say that, Tang Junhe guessed that this should be his idea. Then let's go first. The driver asked for his opinion. Tang Junhe let out a hum. The driver walked in front, led him to the car not far away, and then leaned over to open the door for him. Tang Junhe got into the car and kept looking back. Should I open the window? The driver asked. Don't go, Tang Junhe hurriedly stopped his movements, someone is following me. The driver saw the cautious expression on his face from the rear-view mirror. It didn't look like he was joking, and asked in surprise, who is following you? I'll go down and have a look. Tang Junhe realized that he had slipped the tongue just now, so he quickly turned around and said, no need, the classmate is playing a prank, let's go. The driver looked in that direction again suspiciously, turned his head and started the car, and said, "If you really feel that someone is following you, don't try to be brave." Tang Junhee responded with an sat up straight, and didn't turn his head to look again. After a while, he raised his head and said to the driver, "Uncle Chen, you don't need to pick me up from now on." "What's wrong? I'm not used to someone coming to pick me up," Tang Junhee said looking out the window. "What's wrong with this?" The driver laughed. "I'm just not used to someone coming to pick me up." Tang Junhee said in a stubborn tone, "I will tell Uncle Yang when I get home tonight. Thank you for coming to pick me up this time. These are all Yang Xian's things, he doesn't want any of them." The dinner was made by the nanny aunt. A few days ago, Tang Xiaonian got off work early and bought the ingredients on the way home. When the nanny came to cook according to the usual time, Tang Xiaonian had already processed the ingredients and was ready to eat. The pot is fried. Because he was ashamed to let the nanny go for nothing, Tang Xiaonian asked her to do some insignificant cleaning work. The nanny felt very sorry, so she came to cook half an hour earlier today. Tang Xiaonian himself also worked as a nanny for a period of time. When Tang Junhee was 3 years old, he changed careers after a short period of time. At that time, the hostess of the family who hired her always suspected that she was having an affair with the 50-year-old man in the family. She couldn't bear the uselessness, so she quit the job in a fit of anger and turned to selling clothes for others in the mall. Probably because she is used to hard times, when a nanny appeared at home, she seemed a little at a loss. When Tang Junhee got home, he saw his mother Tang Xiaonian sitting on the sofa staring blankly at the air, wondering what she was thinking. "Are you back?" Tang Xiaonian immediately looked back when he heard the sound of the door being pushed open. Seeing that Tang Junhee had come back from school, he hurriedly got up from the sofa, stepped forward to take his school bag and asked, "Are you still used to the new environment?" "It's okay," Tang Junhee said perfunctorily, changing his slippers. "That doesn't look happy." Tang Xiaonian saw the indistinct water stains on his shoulders after drying sharply, and asked sensitively, "Yang Xian and the others bullied you in class?" "No." Tang Junhee picked up his school bag and walked towards his room. "I'm not a primary school student, so why are there so many bullies?" "Then what happened to the water on your shoulder?" Tang Xiaonian followed up and asked. "The water glass at the same table accidentally spilled and splashed on my shoulder." Tang Junhee tried his best to explain patiently. "Are you at the same table?" Tang Xiaonian changed the subject, "Male and female? Are you easy to get along with?" "Female." Tang Junhee put the school bag on the desk. "Mom, do you still let me do my homework? It's just a few words short of time." Tang Xiaonian's tone was obviously dissatisfied, but he turned around and closed the door of the room for him. Tang Junhee pulled the chair away, sighed after sitting down, and scratched his hair a little irritably. "I don't know when," he began to feel a little impatient with Tang Xiaonian's nagging concern. "Even though I knew it was bad, I still couldn't restrain my emotions." Yang Chengchuan came back later than usual, and after he came back, Tang Junhee was called to the living room for dinner. Yang Chengchuan's complexion looked very bad, presumably it had something to do with Yang Xian. "Xiao Xian isn't coming back." Tang Xiaonian put a bowl of rice in front of him, glanced at him and asked. "They said they wanted a place to stay, and they asked the class teacher to call me as a lobbyist." Yang Chengchuan frowned. "Let him go." Tang Xiaonian glanced at him again in surprise, sat down to eat without saying anything. No one spoke, and there was another relatively wordless silence. After a while, Yang Chengchuan suddenly said, "You didn't say anything to Yang Xian in the morning, did you?" Tang Xiaonian's action of picking up vegetables immediately stopped, looked up at him and asked, "What do you mean?" Yang Chengchuan knew that he had made a slip of the tongue, so he quickly calmed down and said, "It's just a casual question, don't think too much about it." Tang Xiaonian slammed his chopsticks on the table, stopped eating, and asked him, "What do you mean I am overthinking?" "Yang Chengchuan, You mean I kicked your eldest son out, right? Here we go again. Tang Junhee felt pain in his temple like a needle prick. Maybe he should apply for accommodation with Yang Xian. No, I didn't mean that. Yang Chengchuan swallowed and admitted his mistake. I shouldn't have asked that question just now. Seeing that Tang Xiaonian was still staring at him, he could only pat the back of her hand to persuade her, in front of the child in front of you, don't make trouble for Xiaonian. My mother didn't say anything to Yang Xian. Tang Junhee said with lowered eyes. Yang Chengchuan was stunned for a moment, and after hearing the estrangement in these words, he forced a little smile and said, I know, I know. Then he changed the subject in a timely manner. By the way, Junhee, listen to what your Uncle Chen said. Do you think someone followed you after school today? Hearing this, Tang Xiaonian couldn't care less about getting angry with Yang Chengchuan, so he looked at Tang Junhee nervously and asked, Who is following you? No, it was a classmate who was watching me, Tang Junhee said, not stalking. Tang Xiaonian breathed a sigh of relief and said, I just said, it's been so many years. Seeing that Tang Xiaonian's face softened, Yang Chengchuan quickly seized the opportunity to turn his head to court her, and asked, Has anyone followed Junhee before? Tang Xiaonian ignored him at first, took a few mouthfuls of food on his own, and after a while he said, It's a teacher. After all, he was his youngest son, so Yang Chengchuan couldn't say that he didn't care at all, and asked with concern, Why is the teacher still doing follow-up? The teacher is a pervert, Tang Xiaonian said unhappily, I didn't have any good intentions. At that time, Jun Hyuk skipped a grade. He said he would help make up lessons. I thought he was kind, but I didn't expect Mom. Tang Junhee interrupted her suddenly, nothing happened, so don't mention it. Why can't you mention it? Tang Xiaonian said emotionally, what if something happened at that time? Yang Chengchuan guessed what Tang Xiaonian was interrupted, and asked, male teacher or female teacher? Tang Xiaonian said, male teacher. What's your name? Which school's teacher? Yang Chengchuan's expression became a little serious, and he continued to ask. A math teacher is the primary school Junhee attended at that time, Zeding Primary School, called Jolin, isn't it? Tang Xiaonian looked at Tang Junhee, trying to confirm with him. Tang Junhee didn't say anything. He realized that Yang Chengchuan might not be asking casually, but really wanted to do something. This is easy for Yang Chengchuan today, and it is probably the best way for him to bribe himself and Tang Xiaonian. He is a bit malicious thought. However, he didn't want to be bribed, and he didn't want to take any of what belonged to Yang Xian. The next morning, when Tang Junhee sat down, Yin Kong hugged his water glass and apologized to him, I'm sorry, I will definitely cover the water glass in the future. It's none of your business. Tang Junhee bowed his head and flipped through the textbook. There was no special meaning in these words, it was just telling Yin Kong that he didn't need to take on these irrelevant responsibilities, but because he said it too directly, it meant don't mind your own business. After the words were spoken, Tang Junhee immediately realized this, but he pursed his lips slightly and didn't explain much. Fortunately, Yin Kong is also a big-hearted girl, so she didn't care about his tone. She leaned over and asked in a low voice, but how did you provoke them? Who? Tang Junhee asked knowingly. Yang Xian and Feng Bo. Are they in the same group? Tang Junhee asked again, how should I put it, I don't know if it's a gang or not. Yin Kong scratched his hair, and said with some embarrassment, I feel like Feng Bo and the others want to be with Yang Xian, but Yang Xian doesn't really want to. With them. It's so complicated. Tang Junhee said casually while drawing a line on the textbook. That's right, Yin Kong saw that her table mate, the iceberg beauty, was acting uncharacteristically, and finally agreed to talk to him, and whispered to him enthusiastically, Feng Bo is just a bluffing son. He must be domineering, Chen Hao is full of pornographic thoughts, and sometimes his words are disgusting, and I will tell you secretly, he seems to have a crush on Ying Hui. Tang Junhee said, yes. Seeing that his reaction was cold, Yin Kong felt a little disappointed, so he planned to turn his head around and endorse the book. Before finishing, he said casually, however, how could Ying Hui talk to him? Everyone in the school knows that Ying Hui likes Yang Xian. Unexpectedly, she planned to end it, but Tang Junhee asked for the first time, who is Ying Hui? It's the front of you. Yin Kong pointed to him enthusiastically. Tang Junhee just nodded without looking up. He just wanted to confirm it, although even he himself didn't know why he wanted to confirm it. Yin Kong thought that he was interested in Ying Hui, so he immediately introduced to him, Ying Hui is my friend, a recognized beauty in our number 1 middle school, with good grades and a good personality. People who chase her can line up from the front door to the back mountain. You want to meet her? Tang Junhee said bluntly, I don't want to. It seems that there is no corresponding interest in Anis. Yin Kong was a little lost, she couldn't figure out what her mysterious tablemate would be interested in. She was about to give up, and casually said what she had already said, but Ying Hui only likes Yang Xian. Unexpectedly, Tang Junhee threw another question, what do you like about him? Yin Kong was caught off guard by this blunt question, what else do you like? You are handsome, you can fight, and you don't like talking to people. Tang Junhee said, that's it. Yin Kong felt that she had an inexplicable illusion that her desk mate seemed to only have a little interest in Yang Xian. She bit her pen and thought, could it be that the rumor about the illegitimate child is true? In the last self-study class, Yang Xian went downstairs to the playground for training. There is less than a month before the city's basketball league. As soon as this semester starts, the school team has stepped up training. As the main force of the basketball team, Yang Xian is naturally the focus of training. Many hours. The school bell rang, and after more than 10 minutes, the class had already left one after another. Maybe it was because Yang Xian didn't give face yesterday, Feng Bo and Chen Hao didn't continue to find fault with Tang Junhee, and left the classroom as soon as school was over. Instead, Tang Junhee didn't move. He took out the English test paper and planned to finish it before leaving. Although he told Yang Chengchuan that he didn't need a driver to pick him up at dinner yesterday, that Uncle Chen will definitely be waiting at the school gate today. He planned to go out half an hour late, to create the illusion that he had already returned home. Halfway through the test paper, Tang Junhee watched the sky darken, got up, packed his school bag and walked out of the classroom. The school's day students have almost left, except for the basketball team training on the playground. There are only a few students carrying school bags on the huge campus. The basketball court was facing the school gate, and when he walked out of the teaching building, Tang Junhee recognized Yang Xian at a glance. He seems to have just finished training. He raised his arms in a stern manner, and threw a finishing ball towards the basket. The ball was scored easily, and then Yang Xian walked towards the basket with his head slightly lowered, while following the people around him. Talking. Tang Junhee stood at the door of the teaching building for a while, watching him throw the ball. He felt that Yang Xian glanced in his direction, so he didn't stop any longer, bowed his head and walked quickly. When he was about to walk out of the school gate, he was instinctively vigilant, wondering if the person who followed him yesterday would still be around today. He looked around vigilantly, but when he turned his head, he saw that person Zhou Lin. He didn't hide today, he just stood by the flower bed some distance away from the school gate, apparently waiting for him to come out. Tang Junhee instinctively wanted to run. The moment he lifted his foot, Zhou Lin called out to him, Xiao He. The voice was neither high nor low, but it was extremely clear in the dark and quiet campus at this moment. Maybe staying on campus is safer than running out, this idea flashed through Tang Junhee's mind. At least the school's security office is not far away, and Yang Xian is still standing on the playground behind him, but, Yang Xian is still on the playground up? Or is it already gone? Zhou Lin walked towards him, stretched out his hand and tried to pull his arm. Tang Junhee dodged, he took 2 steps aside, turned his body slightly towards the playground, and then quickly glanced at the playground. Yang Xian was still there, and he couldn't explain why, but he felt a little more at ease. He took a deep breath calmly, looked at Jolin and asked, "Mr. Zhou, why are you here?" "I came to see you, and I asked for leave." Jolin's crew cut looked neat, but it didn't make his temperament look much cleaner. He looked at Tang Junhe with some embarrassment and said, Your classmate said that you transferred here, so I just want to come and see you. You wanted to follow me yesterday." Tang Junhe tried his best to look calm. He took 2 steps towards the old tree that hadn't sprouted yet, and made a posture of leaning on the tree with his body. In fact, he just wanted to face the playground to make sure Yang Xian hadn't walked away. "Who came to pick you up yesterday?" Jolin moved step by step, with his back to the playground, trying to get close to Tang Junhe. "I saw a man came to pick you up. You got into that car. What do you have? What relationship? What does it have to do with you?" Tang Junhe looked in the direction of the playground and said, "Stay away from me." He saw that Yang Xian was also looking at him. Yang Xian was leaning on the basketball hoop to drink water. When their eyes met, he seemed to smile inexplicably. Then, while drinking water slowly, he looked at Tang Junhe's direction with great interest. That kind of gaze must have been misunderstood. Tang Junhe's nails got stuck in the flesh of the palm of his hand. Perhaps what Jolin did to him now, Yang Xian would just watch from afar. "What are you looking at?" Jolin followed his gaze and glanced back, then quickly turned his head back. He raised his arm, as if he wanted to walk over and hug Tang Junhe. "My brother is watching us." Tang Junhe took a step back and said suddenly. Jolin was taken aback for a moment, and stopped when he was about to lift up. "What? Didn't anyone tell you? My brother, half-brother." Tang Junhe tried to make his voice as calm as possible, and lowered his voice. "You can look back, the playground behind you up, he's looking at us." His expression and tone were so calm, as if he was stating a certain thing, so that Jolin looked back again. In the dark sky, with a distance of more than 10 meters, Jolin couldn't see Yang Xian's expression clearly at the moment. He could only vaguely see a tall boy leaning on the basketball hoop, looking at him secretly. Early spring had not yet arrived, and the cold air was still pressing, but the boy was only wearing a half-sleeved t-shirt on his upper body, and the still young muscle lines on his arms were set off very arrogantly by the deepening twilight. Beside him are a few boys who are about the same size as him, and they seem to have a good relationship with him. This glance really made Jolin's heart skip a beat. He didn't dare to stare at that man for too long, turned his head to Tang Junhe, and asked half-believingly, "Is he your brother? Do you need me to call for you?" Tang Junhe squeezed the cold sweat on his palms and said, "If I call him over, maybe it's not as simple as just looking at you." "No, no need," Jolin said. He had obviously given up the idea of coming over and hugging Tang Junhe. "Then you go now." Tang Junhe secretly breathed a sigh of relief. "I will wait for my brother to go home together." Oh, Jolin replied hesitantly, "Ziahe, I have no ill intentions towards you, I just like you, really, I did something wrong before, I didn't restrain myself." "Aren't you going?" Tang Junhe turned his gaze to the playground, took a breath, and pretended to call Yang Xian over. The hand he put into the pocket of his school uniform clenched his fist again, and he had already made a plan in his heart. If Jolin insisted on pestering him, then he would go all out and beat Jolin here maybe or not. He can fight, but after all, he can alarm the security office not far away. "Don't bark, I'll go." Jolin looked at him humbly and said, "I'll come see you on Friday." Tang Junhe didn't speak, but looked at him coldly. After Jolin bowed his head and hurried away, after a few minutes, he leaned against the tree trunk and exhaled a long breath. Looking up at the direction of the basketball hoop again, Yang Xian was turning his back to him, bending down to pick up the clothes beside him, as if he was about to leave. Just now he lied and used Yang Xian, Tang Junhe thought, but it doesn't matter, Yang Xian won't know, because he won't mind his own business now. He grabbed his school bag and ran out of the school gate quickly. There happened to be a bus parked at the station at the door, and he was about to close the door when he ran over in a hurry and opened the door again. Tang Junhe ran over, jumped on the bus, took a seat by the window and sat down, turned his head and watched the bus drive past the school gate, and also past the empty basketball court facing the school gate. It was almost 7:30 when he got home. The food was on the table, Yang Chengchuan and Tang Xiaonian were sitting on the sofa waiting for him, and a boring news broadcast was playing on the TV. "You came back so late today." Seeing him coming back, Tang Xiaonian immediately stood up to greet him. "Is there someone really following you?" "No," Tang Junhe put his school bag aside, "the last class exam was half an hour late." "Oh, take off your school uniform and come to eat quickly." He lied so easily, Tang Xiaonian didn't doubt it, took Tang Junhe's school uniform and asked, "Will the homework in number 1 middle school be more difficult than number 3 middle school?" "It's all the same." Tang Junhe walked towards the dining table. "Your Uncle Chen didn't pick you up tonight, so he thought you were leaving first." Yang Chenchuan's gaze shifted from the news broadcast on TV to his face. He was a little short-sighted, and the appearance of wearing a pair of silver-rimmed glasses at this time reminded Tang Junhe of the word-dressed beast. "There is a special school bus line at the gate of the school, so don't bother Uncle Chen to pick me up every day," Tang Junhe said. "The school's closing time at night may not be so fixed." Tang Xiaonian looked up at him, and said angrily, "You're not happy when someone picks you up." Tang Junhe sat upright at the dining table, and retorted quietly, "Someone came to cook for you, and you didn't see that you were happy." Tang Xiaonian's face changed slightly, and he was about to say something, but was interrupted by Yang Chengchuan. "Junhe is more sensible than Xiaoxian, since you insist, then I will tell Uncle Chen that he doesn't need to pick you up every day." Tang Junhe nodded and said, "Yes. Come on, but keep this one." Yang Chengchuan came over and put a brand new mobile phone on the table in front of him. It was the latest model advertised on TV, and Tang Junhe recognized it at a glance. "Thank you," he declined veiledly, "but I don't really use my phone. Take what is given to you," Tang Xiaonian said. "It will be more convenient for you to call me when you come back late at night." Yang Chengchuan sat down at the dinner table. "Take it, your mother's number is already entered in it, and your brother and mine are also in it." Tang Junhe didn't say anything more, bowed his head and started eating. After eating and returning to the room, he spread out his homework on the table and was stunned for a while, but did not move. After a few minutes, he reached for the silver cell phone, dug out the memo, and deleted Yang Chenchuan's call. Then he clicked on Yang Xian's item again, selected delete, and just about to press the OK button, he paused, turned off the screen, and put the phone back. Forget it, Tang Junhe thought, anyway, he won't use this phone in the future.